Chapter 673. Emolien, don't bully it. Xiao Mu abruptly jumped up and stretched out her small paws to hug that stupidly adorable white snake that had stiffened in midair. She watched as it froze in midair like an idiot and saw that Emolien's cluster of flames was about to pounce on its body. If it was roasted like this, it would turn into a crispy snake. Master. The white snake's watery amber eyes revealed deep admiration. It twisted its body and was about to take advantage of the situation to burrow into Jojo's clothes. Emolien's eyes were sharp and her hands were fast. Taking advantage of the fact that the snake was unprepared, she clamped its head between her hands and casually flung it. With a whoosh, the white snake flew in a perfect arc in the air and was directly thrown out of the half-open window by Emolien. Emolien's heart was stifled. Why did she have to guard against people and also beast? Looking at the dazed look on the white snake's face, Emolien imagined it. It was obviously a lecherous snake. How could she leave it in her baby's room? Absolutely not. What are you doing? When Arbor saw that Emolien actually threw the pitiful white snake out of the window, she was speechless and helpless for a moment. Just as she was about to walk to the window, her little hand was pulled back by Emolien. Jojo, it's a male snake. You can't hide it in your clothes. Especially not on your chest. Emolien said with a serious face. Arbor couldn't help but roll her eyes. I just wanted to take it and put it back in the basket. Now look, I don't know where you threw it. Emolien snorted and glanced at the door. It came back on its own. The white snake slithered up the table and gazed pitifully at Xiao Mu, tears dripping down from its large eyes. This thing pretending to be pitiful. Emolien was just about to pick it up and throw it away. Hence, Xiao Mu stretched out her hand to stop him. After glaring at him irritably, she lifted up that pitiful snakelet. What are you doing? Don't bully children. What little kid? He dared to bet with Duan Yu's head. This weak-looking little white snake was definitely an adult snake. Moreover, judging from the speed and strength it had hidden just now, one could tell that it was an exceptionally black-bellied fellow. Emolien's gaze coldly fell on the snake's head. Suddenly, the little white snake turned its head and fiercely glared at him. Damn, he was indeed a scheming snake. Hey. He was glaring at him behind his baby's back. Sigh. Boys were all brave and fierce. Even a man could fight with a male snake. Xiao Mu placed the little white snake into the basket and stroked its head. Suddenly his fingers paused. She abruptly discovered that this little white snake didn't feel icy cold to the touch. Instead, it felt as smooth and warm as a piece of beautiful jade. She clearly remembered the first time this snake appeared beside her bed. That kind of soft, greasy and cold rubbing sensation gave her goosebumps. But now, what was with this warm feeling? Master. The little white snake's head rubbed against Arbor's finger back and forth with great enjoyment. The more student Emolien looked, the angrier he got. Alright, stop stroking. The more she stroked, the more excited this damn snake got. Emolien hastily pulled Arbor's small hand back and held it in his own as he pulled her outside. Come, accompany me to greet father and mother. Emolien's finger moved slightly, and an ink-colored ring silently hovered above his finger. Chapter 674. Arbor's eyes brightened slightly. He reached out to take the ring and put it on his finger. Once he activated his mystic energy, a transparent eggshell defensive barrier appeared around her. She could feel that the defensive power was much stronger than before. This defensive barrier had definitely been reinforced. Emolien. The little fellow tilted her head and reached out to hold his large palm. Emolien lowered his head slightly and lightly flicked her forehead. He lifted her up in an instant and looked deeply into her eyes with a smile. Do you want to return the favor? This husband will gladly accept it. Darling Qiao's little face was instantly dyed with a layer of red clouds, and she looked around with a guilty conscience. There's no one. Emolien laughed in spite of himself. Darling dislikes those annoying people who come in and out all day, so didn't Darling chase them all away? Only Xiaoyao is left, so she hid far away long ago. That's right, she had already chased them out of Nanju Garden. She wasn't a particular person and didn't need others to take care of her daily needs. Then give me a kiss as a return gift. Emolien turned his head and was about to press down on the little fellow's lips. Daughter, Papa Qiao shouted. The two separated immediately upon contact. Prince Mo's hand trembled and he almost dropped the baby in guilt. Our dear Xiao Mu's face was as red as a tomato, and she couldn't help but lower her head. Prince Mo's heart felt even more stifled. My dear father. You really know how to pick the right time to come. Qiao Zhongbang strode in as if he was flying. He immediately saw Prince Mo and his daughter standing on the left and right, leaving quite a bit of space between them. As a father, he was very satisfied. He knew that the crown prince wasn't someone who would mess around. Look, he was doing a surprise inspection this time. Little Mo, this child, was standing beside his daughter in a cultured and refined manner. He even maintained a distance from her. What a considerate child. The more he looked at him, the more he liked him. At this time, Papa Chow had completely forgotten that the crown prince didn't even enter through the front door. He directly touched the back window and barged into the boudoir. Crown Prince. Father, don't be so courteous. Chow Chow and I just happened to be going to greet you and Mom, so let's talk on the way. Crown Prince Mo stealthily tugged at Chow Chow's small hand as he welcomed Chow Chow outside with a smile. Meanwhile, in the imperial study of the palace of the king, the great king smiled as he summoned the Qin estate's father and son trio. He waved his hand and said, Patriarch Qin, the two young masters Qin have been wronged. The crown prince is a careful and steady child. Most of the things that I did not consider thoroughly, he was able to handle them very well. The reason why so many soldiers have been dispatched to guard the estate is because they are worried that some unforeseen event will occur in the Qin estate. Great King is too serious. Qin Guelu hastily cupped his hands and said with a smile, Your Highness, the crown prince's actions are exactly what this Qin wishes for. Now that the 10-day deadline was up, no one in the Qin estate had shown any signs of abnormalities. Everyone could see with a single glance that this was the case. Even if some zombies appear in the capital in the future, it shouldn't be blamed on our Qin estate. That's right, that's right. The great king chuckled and pointed at the seat in front of him. Patriarch Qin, please take a seat. Thank you, great king. Qin Guelu thanked him and sat down. First Qin and Omega Kotoku walked to stand behind their father with their heads slightly lowered. Present the box to the great king. Yes, father. First Qin walked forward and bowed slightly. He raised the treasure box above his head with both hands. The great king's face lit up, and a satisfied smile appeared in his eyes. He glanced at Gong Chang'an, who was standing to the side. Chapter 675. The latter hurriedly understood and hurriedly walked down the steps to take the box that eldest Qin presented. There are 3 meridian pacifying pills inside. The 50 strengthening pills are our Qin estate's offering to His Majesty as a token of our sincerity. Qin Guelu lowered his head slightly and said, This Qin is also very apologetic that His Highness the Crown Prince was startled at the Qin estate. Qin Guelu looked up, and Omega Kotoku walked out from behind his father. He opened a long box and presented it to the great king. The old great king looked down and grinned from ear to ear. This 400-year-old ginseng was obtained by chance when my son went out for training. Now, I present it to His Highness the Crown Prince as an apology gift. I hope that the great king won't dislike this Qin's small token of appreciation, Qin Guelu said with a smile. Good, good, good. The great king nodded happily. Gong Chang, and send someone to deliver this to the Eastern Palace. Since the Qin family was so tactful, the great king naturally removed their restraining order and unsealed the Qin estate. After placating Qin Guelu and giving him some rewards, he ordered someone to escort the 3 people from the Qin estate out of the palace. After leaving the palace, Qin Guelu wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and sighed in relief. Where are you going? Qin Guelu called out when he saw Omega Kotoku turn to leave. You guys go back first. I have some matters to attend to. Omega Kotoku left these words coldly before swaggering off. Qin Guelu looked uneasily at Qin Xian. Is second young master angry? Qin Xian swept him a glance. Qin Guelu hurriedly added, But I have no choice. After all, we're in the lower star domain right now, and it's not good to openly clash with the old great king of the Mo kingdom. I can only wrong eldest young master and second young master and throw some benefits to the old Mo king and resolve the problem at hand first. Qin Xian said with a spurious smile. He's not angry. It's just that this time you acted on your own initiative and even went for wool and came home shorn. It's a bit vexing. Qin Guelu stiffened and he was inwardly shocked. They knew? Don't tell me you think that Omega Kotoku hasn't noticed the little tricks that you and Shantian Mansion have done? Qin Guelu's cold sweat instantly dripped from his forehead. The secret exchange of pill recipes with Shantian Prefecture's Chio-san had been carried out behind the backs of those 2. But now it had been exposed so blatantly. Eldest young master, this subordinate's surname is Qin. Born as a member of the Qin family, I will die as a ghost of the Qin family. I will never betray the Qin family. This subordinate was only. It was only because I coveted those few rare pill formulas that Master Chio-san provided that I repeatedly colluded with Chio-san for benefits. Idiot. Qin Xian glanced coldly at Qin Guelu. You don't even know that you're being used as a pawn. If it weren't for second brother helping you clean up the mess, do you think the Qin estate would have been able to extricate itself from the corpse puppet incident so quickly? Qin Guelu's pupils contracted as he looked incredulously at eldest young Sir Qin. Eldest young sir, please speak frankly. Do you know how many people that person sent to infiltrate the Qin estate to search for evidence? If it weren't for second brother erasing all the secret letters and correspondence that you colluded with Shuntian Prefecture, you would have already been sent to prison. Haha, perhaps your head would have already fallen to the ground. Eldest young Sir Qin nonchalantly spat out these words, but Qin Guelu's expression changed drastically, and his pupils contracted. Why you're talking about His Highness the Crown Prince? Qin Guelu turned pale with fright. That man is vicious, merciless, and cold-hearted. Chapter 676. Qin Xian sneered. Once he obtains evidence, the entire Qin estate won't be spared. Qin Guelu, be more careful in the future. Aren't his match. Eldest young Sir Qin chuckled and didn't say anything else. Leaving the dumbstruck Qin Guelu behind, he turned and floated away. Qin Guelu simply didn't expect that the two young sirs had already secretly exchanged blows with the crown prince. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and a wry smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It turned out that his little actions had all fallen into the young sir's eyes. To think that he had been so pleased with himself in the dark. Qin Guelu had to admit that he was old. These young children were truly each more ruthless than the other. Omega Kotoku sat in a carriage and coldly recited the name of a place. After the carriage set off, a large crowd of cheering girls rushed out from the corner of the street after hearing the news. They had all rushed over to watch the young sir of the Qin estate, but unfortunately, they were half a beat too late and only ate a mouthful of dust. The carriage stopped in front of a house, far away in a corner. The carriage driver didn't know what his master was waiting for, but he didn't dare to ask. He could only wait silently with his master. A small blue and white palanquin was parked in front of the residence's entrance. A young miss stood in front of the palanquin accompanied by a maidservant with a somewhat gloomy expression. Omega Kotoku was silently waiting for something inside the carriage, and that young miss was also waiting at someone else's door. After waiting for a full 3 hours, it was already past lunchtime. The carriage driver opened his mouth and carefully called out, "Second young sir." Then he heard a creak from the other end, and the residence's main door was suddenly pulled open inwardly. Two figures walked out of the door hand in hand, followed by a male and female bodyguard maidservant. Omega Kotoku's deep gaze locked onto the young lady who stepped out of the door first through the carriage's curtain, his aura gloomy. "Eldest Miss Xiao, is this your original appearance? That Mu Xiaobao is also a fake name." Young Sir Omega Kotoku's cold gaze landed on Miss Xiao's small hand that the crown prince was holding, and he instinctively felt uncomfortable. How could he let another man hold her soft and delicate hand? It felt like something in the depths of Xiao Chen's heart had been torn apart, making him feel somewhat uneasy. Omega Kotoku stared coldly at the two men. The glint and shadow of the sword in his eyes were almost tangible. So much so that Arbor and Emolien both turned to look at the carriage. Separated by the thick curtain of the carriage, the two men's cold gazes met in a straight line. After a moment, Omega Kotoku clenched his fists. "Let's go home." For some reason, the coachman felt that the surrounding air seemed to have become a few degrees colder. It was already the 12th month of winter, so he couldn't help but sneeze several times. Rubbing his nose, he hurriedly got into the carriage and rushed back to the Qin estate. "Who's in the car?" Arbor asked curiously as he tugged at the prince's sleeve. "Irrelevant people." Emolien's gaze followed the carriage. After a moment, she retracted her gaze and lowered her head to look at Arbor. "No need to pay attention to them." Arbor didn't pursue the matter. After eating, the two planned to go out for a stroll. She had just given him 4 ebony storage talismans filled with winter fruits. Speaking of the 50 winter fruit trees, it was a bit funny. Chochio was like an idiot, insisting on accelerating their growth and harvesting the winter fruits. After picking a few rounds of fruits, she wondered if something had gone wrong with the trees. Chapter 677. Now that she was on the verge of death from Chochio's torment, she reckoned that she would have to recuperate properly for a while. However, Chochio had become increasingly spirited these past 2 days. Those unlucky winter fruit trees had been ruthlessly squeezed dry. A 12 cubic meter ebony blue storage talisman really couldn't store that many winter fruits. She had to store no less than 4 ebony talismans before she finally cleared out her overstock of winter fruits. The Crown Prince was also very astonished to obtain so many winter fruits to store, and he even hugged his Jojo and praised her. This time, Song Yuan of the Ministry of Revenue was going to be happy. Official Song, who originally came to him every day to complain about being poor, had already started repeatedly slandering him these past few days, instigating him to make an example of his father's harem and suggesting that the harem's expenses be reduced. This could also be considered a solution. Right now, the common people of the Mo Kingdom capital were almost unable to fill their stomachs, while the Great King's harem were all exceedingly extravagant. If they could reduce their expenses, they would definitely be able to save a large amount of expenses. Miss Chiao. Suddenly, a round-faced maidservant blocked their path with a flushed face. You, how can you turn a blind eye to our miss? As it turned out, after the two left, they didn't even glance at that Miss Wu in front of the palanquin and were just about to leave hand in hand. This time they were blocked by that maidservant. Glancing to the side, they saw that Miss Wu was dressed in pink and white with a thin fur coat draped over her shoulders and a delicate hairpin inserted into her hair. Braving the cold wind, she stood next to the small palanquin, her small face slightly flushed from the wind, her eyes filled with faint grievance. Impudent. Hui Feng reprimanded. A mere maidservant actually dares to block the path of the Crown Prince and Crown Princess? Why don't you kneel in greeting after seeing His Highness? That maidservant quivered in fright and immediately knelt on the ground, her shoulders trembling as she said, "This servant has been impolite. Greetings to the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Seeing that you are loyal to your master, I won't bicker with you. Withdraw." Arbor coldly ordered. That maidservant hastily crawled 2 steps back and obediently knelt on the side, not daring to get up. Wu Xiaosu couldn't help but clench her cold fists tightly under her sleeves. With a stiff expression, Wu Xiaosu stepped forward and bowed to the Crown Prince. "Xiaosu greets your highness and Miss Chiao." Prince Mo's slender eyebrows involuntarily furrowed as he coldly reprimanded her in a low voice. "Don't you know to call her the Crown Princess?" Wu Xiaosu's fingers under her sleeves were almost broken. She shrank back and knelt on the ground. She lowered her head and said respectfully, "Xiaosu thinks so." Miss Chiao had yet to be married to His Highness. Such an overstep of her status to address Miss Chiao in such a manner was likely to ruin her reputation. "Xiaosu has been taught by my mother since young, so I don't dare to lose my sense of propriety and ruin Miss' reputation." What a sharp tongue. The Crown Prince sneered. "Are you accusing this Crown Prince of lacking propriety? It's Xiaosu who is inarticulate and doesn't know how to speak properly. I've angered your highness. I hope your highness can forgive me." Wu Xiaosu knelt in front of Prince Mo and raised her pitiful face, aggrieved tears threatening to roll down her cheeks. "All right, it's just a form of address. Darling Chiao really wasn't that particular." She tugged at the Crown Prince's hand and said, "Let's go. Are we still shopping or not? Why bother with her?" Only then did Prince Mo retract his gaze and pull on Arbor's small hand in displeasure. Just as he turned around, he heard Miss Wu call out, "Miss Chiao, please wait." Chapter 678. A trace of impatience flitted across Arbor's brows. Was she very familiar with her? She came to visit her out of the blue and didn't even have an invitation. Where were the rules and etiquette she kept talking about? Was this the etiquette taught by her Wu family? Miss Chiao, previously because of me, Madam Chiao and second Miss Chiao suffered a bit of a fright. This is just a small token of my respect. Wu Xiaosu walked briskly to Arbor's side and suddenly took out a long box from her inner world, handing it over to Arbor. "What do you mean?" Arbor felt that this woman was very baffling. Wu Xiaosu nodded slightly at her and said with a smile that didn't show her teeth, "If I hadn't delayed your mother for a while at Dongshan Gate, perhaps they would have left long ago and wouldn't have encountered the black-clothed men's pursuit." "You're here to apologize to my mother?" Arbor asked coldly. Wu Xiaosu was startled and barely managed to quell the anger in her chest. She thought to herself that this Chiao family's eldest miss was too blunt in her speech. How was this an apology? She was just using an excuse to visit this eldest Miss Chiao and get closer to her in passing. Was this eldest Miss Chiao an idiot? How could she be so ignorant of the ways of the world? She couldn't even discern this kind of polite greeting. Who didn't know? Even if she, Wu Xiaosu, hadn't stopped Madame Chiao outside Dongshan Gate, the mother and daughter pair would still have met with danger, all right? How was this an apology? According to the rules, if she came to other families' young ladies to express goodwill, shouldn't they immediately let her in first? Since you're here to apologize to my mother, Why must you insist on standing outside my door and insist on seeing me? You can go find my mother yourself. What a baffling woman. Wu Xiaosu was so angry that her hands, which were holding the long box, couldn't help but tremble slightly. If she could, she really wanted to give this stoic face a big slap. Can you freaking understand the ways of the world? Don't you want others to lose face by speaking like this to a guest who came to your door? The corner of Prince Mo's mouth twitched slightly. He glanced at Miss Wu and held back his laughter as he turned his face away. Arbor saw that Wu Xiaosu's lips were trembling and she was frozen in place without saying a word. He looked at her impatiently and said, "Is there anything else? If there's nothing important, then don't block the way. We still have things to do." "Since you've already said so, what else can I do?" Wu Xiaosu clenched her fists tightly under her sleeves and moved to the side mechanically to make way for them. She watched as Arbor and the Crown Prince swaggered off. Her eyes seemed to be burning with fury. This was the result of her waiting from morning until afternoon. She hadn't even taken a step into the Qiao family's house. Good. This big Miss Qiao was truly formidable. Without meeting her, he would not have known that this person was actually such a ruthless character who was impervious to everything. At such a young age he was very scheming. Wu Xiaosu thought that Arbor's entire person was a conspiracy. She believed that this big Miss Qiao deliberately gave her the cold shoulder in front of the Crown Prince all morning. Then, she ruthlessly brushed her aside in front of the Crown Prince and completely shut the door on her. Did she think that she would give up just like that? Her mind was filled with her aunt's earnest exhortations. "You must become good sisters with big Miss Qiao of the Marquis of Juan's estate." How could she have known that Miss Qiao was completely baffled by her? A total stranger suddenly came to seek an audience with an appearance of deep sisterly love. Didn't she find it funny? Chapter 679. Young Master. On the way, a ghost-like figure silently appeared in the carriage and bent down to salute. "Did you wipe it clean?" Omega Kotoku asked softly, her voice as cold as iron. "Yes." Omega Kotoku nodded, and her gaze shifted to that person's shoulder. A dark red spot was seeping through the black clothes. "You fought with someone?" "Yes." That person's mouth widened, and his eyes revealed a bloodthirsty intent. But the person who fought with this subordinate didn't end up well either. His injuries were more severe than mine. Haha, he probably won't make it past tonight. Omega Kotoku nodded slightly and then had the person leave the carriage. "Mu Xiaobao, you want to run away so irresponsibly after provoking this young master?" The teacup at Omega Kotoku's fingertips suddenly turned into powder. That was impossible. Arbor reached out to rub his slightly itchy nose. Emolian then grabbed his small hand and rubbed it. Cold. What cold? She was a mystic cultivator. How could she be cold in such a chilly winter day? It didn't matter even if she wore an unlined garment. But if she really wore an unlined garment outside, not to mention the Crown Prince, her parents would be the first to nag at her nonstop. It was sunny after the snow, and there were quite a lot of people on the streets today. The two people strolled aimlessly on the streets for a while, quietly enjoying the slow flow of time. However, the good times didn't last long. A wail broke the peace on the streets and the pedestrians hastily dodged. The sound of shouting and whips, accompanied by a woman's cries and screams, quickly caused the streets to be in chaos. The Crown Prince lowered his head and took out a jade communication talisman from his sleeve. When he saw the small characters that appeared on it, his expression darkened. "Jojo, I need to return to the pavilion to take a look. I'll send you back first." "What's wrong?" "Aoyi got a bit injured." Arbor suddenly raised a brow. "Aoyi got injured? Can I go with you?" The Crown Prince was slightly startled. Then he smiled and said, "It's even better if you go with me. How could I forget that not only is my Jojo an alchemist, his medical skills are even better. Can you let me know the location of the pavilion?" Arbor blinked. "What are you talking about? I don't have any secrets in front of you. Just ask me directly if you want to know anything. Besides, you're the mistress of the Hidden Night Pavilion. You can go anywhere." The Crown Prince squeezed her hand. "Let's go." Xiaomu nodded. Just as the two of them were about to leave hand in hand, they saw a sobbing woman running toward them while hugging a child. Seeing that she was about to fall headfirst into Xiaomu's body, the Crown Prince hastily caught his darling by the waist and dodged to avoid that impetuous woman. As a result, the woman, who was carrying a child, fell heavily to the ground with a thud. The child in her arms groaned a couple of times and burst into tears. "You bitch, you still dare to run." The man's angry curses were mixed with the sound of a whip slicing through the air, instantly landing on the woman's head. Smack. When the whip landed diagonally on the woman's back, the man's hand clearly stiffened, as if he didn't expect this whip to land so easily. The woman grimaced in pain as she hugged the child. She rolled towards the crown prince's feet. This miss, please be kind and help us, mother and son." According to the routine, the rich miss would definitely sympathize with the mother and son's misfortune. Who would have expected that the little stoic? The 8th watch ended today. Chapter 680. Beat. Arbor ordered. Huifeng's mouth twitched, and he immediately reflexively slapped the man holding the whip. Paw. With a slap, the unlucky man holding the whip fell to the ground with a thud. "Thank you, miss, for saving me. Thank you. This commoner is—" The woman holding the baby wept as she knelt in front of the crown prince and repeatedly thanked him. Continue. Xiao Mu was unable to move her limbs from being hugged by the crown prince, so she turned her head to say to Huifeng, "Hit." Both man and woman. The onlookers, who were originally watching the drama of a beauty saving the weak mother and child, were instantly thrown into disarray. What was going on with this eldest miss? Wasn't she saving someone? Why did she want to beat the injured woman as well? Why was the brain circuit of a rich family's daughter so different from that of a normal person? Arbor patted the crown prince's chest and had him put him down. He snatched the whip from the man's hand and threw it to Huifeng. Beat. 50 lashes each. Everyone. Even if the county magistrate was handling a case, he wouldn't give each person 50 lashes. Where did this monster come from? The crown prince couldn't help but facepalm. The scene was a bit tragic for a moment. The woman and man both screamed miserably on the street and rolled on the ground in pain under Huifeng's whips. They crawled and wailed, clutching their heads and trying to flee like rats. Xiao Mu didn't even bat an eyelid as she accepted the child that Xiao Yao carried over. She reached out to check his pulse, lifted up the child's eyelids to take a look, and then fished out a pill for him to consume. At the same time, he flicked his fingertips, and 2 talismans instantly turned into 2 streaks of light that pounced on the man and woman. Who sent you? Arbor coldly looked at the sobbing woman and curled his lips in mockery. Don't beat, miss, don't beat. The woman had only wailed 2 sentences in her sobbing state before her entire body quivered, and she answered Xiao Mu's question in full detail like beans from a bamboo tube. When the dictum talisman was activated, there was almost no need for any reaction time for it to take effect. It was a girl who gave us a liter of rice and asked us to put on this show. That girl said that Miss is kind-hearted. When you see me being chased and beaten by my husband, you will definitely save me. She also asked me to beg you to take me in. What does that girl look like? How old are you? Arbor asked coldly. The onlookers at the side were already dumbfounded. They didn't expect that this woman had teamed up with her husband to put on a show to deceive this rich young lady. She's pretty, just like a flower. She looks about 18 or 19 years old and is wearing a light pink fur coat. Her body looks a little frail, the woman replied honestly. Apart from rice, what else did I give you? Yes. The woman lowered her head and fished out a thumb-sized golden cicada from her waist pouch. She respectfully presented it to Arbor. Arbor swept a glance over and his expression changed slightly. He sneered, "What did she tell you? Tell me word by word." Yes. The woman didn't hide anything and told Arbor everything that the girl told her. A trace of anger flitted across the crown prince's eyes. "We'll go do our business first," Arbor said in a flash and handed the child in his arms to Xiao Yao. "You send him home." Chapter 681. The onlookers who were watching the show were all confused and couldn't figure out what was going on. Xiao Yao couldn't help but be amused by their stupidity. She rested one hand on her waist and held the boy's hand with the other as she scolded, "Look at your foolish faces. Did you all think that our miss was randomly beating people up on the streets? This little boy was clearly abducted. Have you ever seen a mother use her own son as a cushion when she falls down? This child was fed a delirious poison, and it was our miss who gave him the antidote." Xiao Yao grumpily rebuked the passers-by. The onlookers were rendered speechless, and they all smiled sheepishly as they apologized profusely. Peony kicked the swindler couple and asked them where they had picked up the child. Only then did she take the boy and leave. The crown prince and Arbor prepared to return to the hidden night pavilion first to check on Aoye's injuries. "Keep an eye on the 2 of them. Just keep them half alive," the crown prince instructed with a cold expression before leaving. Huifeng immediately bowed his head slightly. The 2 of them left through the northern city gate, and the crown prince immediately summoned Little Seven. The moment the child appeared, Arbor immediately discovered that he had grown up quite a bit. He now looked like a 14 or 15-year-old youth. A pair of golden-red eyes swept over her, and he snorted. Arbor also snorted back at him. He wasn't even as adorable as her Qinghuan. Emolian was baffled. Why were these two little fellows like black-eyed chickens the moment they saw each other and didn't like each other? Little Seven. Emolian stroked Little Seven's little head. Let's go to Marshall Mountain. Seventh Yen pridefully turned his small face away and abruptly turned his head back to glare at Xiao Mu, who had cast her gaze over. Be nicer to little Mo. Yen Qi couldn't help but roar at Arbor. He didn't even know how his master got through all those years. He missed a person so pathetically, thought of a person, and longed for a person to appear. It was heartbreaking to see such a master. Xiao Mu trotted all the way to Yen Qi and suddenly reached out to smack his head. You rude fellow. Call me big sister. How am I not good to him? Why are you so annoying? Every time you see me you either roll your eyes or roll your eyes. Xiao Mu pinched Seventh Yan's cheek forcefully with her small hand, turning his handsome face into a steamed bun. Seventh Yen was so angry that he was breathing through his nose. Emolian was busy separating the two little guys from each other. She kept comforting her baby. Jojo, be careful. You can't beat Little Seven. Little Seven, you're not allowed to do anything. Let go. Classmate Little Seven was about to die from anger. This damned woman was so fierce that she wanted to kill him. She came up and pinched his face. It hurt so much. Arbor smacked him on the head. Call me big sister. Damned woman. Thump, 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 thump. Little Seven reached out to hold his head. He was so angry that he wanted to immediately transform into his beast form and send her flying into the sky. But when he met Little Mo's warning gaze, he was a little scared. The little dragon was so angry. Big sister, stop hitting me. This damned woman. There were 2 small bumps on his head. Wouldn't it have been fine if you had called me big sister earlier? Arbor finally let go of this proud little dragon in satisfaction. Fierce woman. He had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to be her little brother. Chapter 682. Seventh Swallow angrily transformed into his dragon form and carried the 2 of them toward Wulua Mountain. The Hidden Night Pavilion's capital branch was built deep within Wulua Mountain. It had a steep natural barrier, so not many people could come here. There were only small groups of adventurers who didn't go deep into Wulua Mountain. Most of them hunted in the periphery. Thus, the Hidden Night Pavilion had been stationed in Wulua Mountain for many years, so it was relatively peaceful. Arbor followed the Crown Prince to a mountain wall and watched as the Crown Prince pressed his palm against a stone block. A stone door opened in the originally barren mountain wall. The 2 of them walked in hand, and Seventh Swallow angrily followed behind them. The inside of the stone wall was very spacious. The ceiling hung high and the wall lamps reflected light. It was a different world. Hidden Flower walked over and bowed to the 2 of them. Your Highness, Stay Up Late's injuries are quite serious. As he spoke, he brought the 2 of them to a small stone room. The moment Arbor walked in, he smelled a faint scent of blood. Stay Up Late was lying on a stone bed with his eyes closed and a thin blanket covering his body. Crown Princess, be careful. When Hidden Flower saw Xiao Mu walk to Aoye's side and lift his blanket, he hastily called out in shock. Arbor's hands were like flowing clouds. He quickly lifted half of Stay Up Late's blanket. A pitch-black withered branch that looked like a ghost claw suddenly shot out of his chest and went straight for Arbor. Xiao Mu harumphed coldly, and a jade-green tree branch abruptly shot out from her sleeve, ruthlessly lashing at those 5 ghost claws upon contact. Every time it struck, the ghost claw would twist a little, and the pitch-black withered branch would emit black smoke. Not long after, it was smashed into pieces by the emerald green branch, falling to the ground piece by piece. Chio, what the hell is this? Arbor actually didn't know what had come out of Stay Up Late's chest. Thus, he communicated with it telepathically. Chio said disdainfully, Master, this is an evil plant called the Ghost Claw Vine. It looks like a ghost claw and attacks very quickly. But if he meets Chio, isn't it a piece of cake? Arbor had long since gotten used to the smelly Chio style of praising himself every 3 sentences. Prince walked over and looked down at the wound on Stay Up Late's chest. Jojo, how are you? It's okay, I'll give him an injection. The ghost-clawed vine in his body has also been removed. He will recover. Hidden Flower heaved a sigh of relief. The Crown Prince crushed half of the vine on the ground. I didn't expect that the Qin estate was still hiding a demonic cultivator. I really underestimated them. Arbor took out his needle bag. His hands paused for a moment. Qin estate? Aoyi was injured by someone from the Qin estate? That's right. The crown prince sneered and said, this time we were one step behind. The people of the Qin estate were one step ahead of us in erasing all traces of their collusion with the Shantian prefecture. It's really disappointing that we couldn't convict them. Moreover, even Aoyi was heavily injured by the Qin estate's people. In this confrontation, the crown prince had suffered a hidden loss. The Qin estate had only lost an insignificant batch of pills. Speaking of which, he had lost this round. The two people from the Qin estate were indeed very smart. They were really two difficult bones to chew. Arbor seriously finished giving Aoyi the injection and fed him 2 healing pills. Send someone to take good care of him for the next 2 days. He needs to rest for about 7 days. Hidden Flower nodded and sent the 2 people out of the stone room, bidding them farewell respectfully. Chapter 683. Wu residence, eldest master, eldest madam, it's bad, it's bad. The manservant guarding the door frantically ran in and shouted, the Supreme Court has come to arrest eldest Mississippi. What? The teacup in Master Wu's hand fell to the ground with a clang. He jumped up from his seat and angrily glared. What nonsense are you spouting? When did Xiaosu commit a crime to trouble the Supreme Court's people to come arrest her? As he spoke, 2 officers from the Supreme Court had already walked through the door and cupped their hands towards Master Wu. These lowly officers greet Sir Wu. Eldest Master Wu was precisely Princess Anam Wu Hongma's direct elder brother. This person had been ignorant and incompetent since young. If it weren't for relying on his brother-in-law, the vassal king of Annan, and desperately begging for an idle 7th-rank official position, he would probably still be a nobody right now. The Wu family was used to having smooth sailing days. Although the old master's official position wasn't high, with the vassal king of Annan as his brother-in-law, who dared to be disrespectful to the Wu family. This was the first time that the Supreme Court had sent people to challenge them. Apologies, Sir Wu. These lowly officers are under orders to arrest eldest Miss Wu. Please cooperate, sir. The 2 officers said with a fake smile. Impudent. Senior Madame Wu put on airs and angrily rebuked, what right do you have to arrest her? Our family's Xiaosu is a pure and innocent maiden, so how could she follow you to the Supreme Court? We have an arrest warrant. Someone brought out evidence to say that your family's eldest miss committed attempted swindling. With both the witness and material evidence, eldest miss can't deny it. Will Madam please not wantonly obstruct the Supreme Court from handling the case? Otherwise, you won't be able to explain yourself in front of the great king. Senior Madame Wu was so angry that she fell onto her stool. She looked at the 2 officers with reddened eyes before hastily turning to eldest Master Wu and calling out, Master. Master Wu's lips also trembled, but he couldn't speak. Those 2 officers shook the arrest warrant in their hands and sneered, if eldest master doesn't hand her over, then this lowly officer can't return to report on our mission. We can only go in and arrest her ourselves. A moment later, the pale-faced Wu Xiaosu was called to the main hall. Without saying a word, a servant came forward and put shackles on her wrists. Old Madame Wu screamed, what are you doing? What did my daughter do? What right do you have to put her in chains? I'm sorry, Madame Wu. Young Miss Wu's attempted swindle was absolutely true. He was definitely going to jail. If you don't believe me, you can follow us to the Supreme Court. The Wu family seal was carved into the corner of the rice bag. The servant impatiently pushed aside Senior Madame Wu, who had pounced forward. Eldest Miss is a mystic cultivator. In order to prevent her from escaping, I'm sorry, but I could only put on special shackles for mystic cultivators. Take him away. Mother. Father. Wu Xiaosu's face was filled with fear and panic as she was dragged out by the 2 servants without any trace of politeness. Old Madame Wu almost fainted on the ground. She hurriedly grabbed the maidservant's hand and said in a trembling voice, prepare the carriage immediately. Go to the vassal king of Annan's estate. At dusk, the news of Princess Annam and Wu Hongma bringing Senior Madame Wu into the palace to tearfully complain to Her Majesty the Queen, accusing the crown princess of abusing her power to bully others, had spread like wildfire in the palace. When the queen sent someone to the Qiao estate to invite the little girl had just returned to the estate for less than a quarter of an hour. When she heard the news, she didn't even lift her eyelids and only coldly instructed Xiao Yao, go call the steward over. Chapter 684. After Chang Zai hurried over, he greeted eldest miss with trepidation. Although this eldest miss was young, her aura was very frightening. Every time Chang Zai was in front of eldest miss, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. In half a cup of tea's time, gather all the servants and maids in the entire estate. Arbor coldly said, bring me all the indenture contracts. Also, call the people from the broker house over. Chang Zai's heart thumped. How could he dare to hesitate? He quickly went to inform all the servants and sent someone to the broker house to invite people over. In the quiet courtyard, Arbor had someone bring a chair to sit in front of her. In front of her was a small table with a list of personnel. Chunying and Xiaoyun were the first to arrive. They ran all the way over, their foreheads covered in sweat. When they saw eldest Miss sitting there and flipping through the list of personnel, they didn't dare to speak and just stood there obediently. Soon half a cup of tea's time passed. Aside from Chunying and Xiaoyun, there was only the gardener Old Bai, the sweeping nanny Sun Yang, 2 maids from the outer courtyard and 2 servants. The 8 people lined up in 2 rows and looked at each other in dismay. Arbor didn't say anything and ordered Xiao Yao to light an incense stick on the table. Her fingers lightly flipped through the list of personnel, occasionally raising her head to look at the people present. When the 2 incense sticks burned out, the last 2 servants who arrived late yawned and rushed over. Seeing many people standing in the courtyard, the 2 servants hurriedly squeezed behind the crowd. Compared to the other estates, the Qiao estate didn't have many servants. However, they also didn't have many masters. The eldest branch had a family of 5, while the second branch only had 2 people, so there were only 7 masters in total. Moreover, Qiao Mu wasn't home all year round. Speaking of which, 15 to 16 servants were enough to serve 6 masters. Father Qiao, Mother Qiao and second Uncle Qiao were easy to talk to. Usually there wasn't much work at home. Just look at how undisciplined these people were. Arbor sneered. He had Chunying and the other 8 people stand to the side and coldly looked at the remaining 7 or 8 servants. Steward Chang, you didn't inform them to come see me in half a cup of tea's time? Arbor coldly asked. Understood, Chang Zai said in a trembling voice. You dared to do this even after being notified. That means you don't have any respect for your master. Arbor sneered again. 10 strokes each. We'll talk after that. Those 7 to 8 boy servants and maids immediately panicked, but several black-clothed youths abruptly jumped out from behind Xiao Mu to suppress them, and they brandished their cudgels without any room for protest. Among them there was a boy servant that Xiao Mu recognized. He was precisely her younger brother Qiao Sen's lackey who was making the most noise and yelling the most viciously. After each of them hit 10 times without missing a beat, the black-clothed youths retreated behind Arbor in a well-trained manner. Arbor coldly glanced at the crowd. If you still dare to howl, I'll hit you 20 more times. In an instant there was complete silence in the front courtyard. I've summoned all of you here today because I want all of you to honestly answer a question of mine. Arbor's eyes were unusually cold as he swept his gaze across the row of servants standing in front of him. A few days ago, someone sold information about my court to the eldest miss of the Wu family. They said that I was unreasonable, crafty and cold by nature. They said that I didn't like people to serve me at close quarters. They even dismissed the people of Nanju Garden. As soon as Arbor finished speaking, the last 2 young servant girls who had blended into the crowd lowered their heads. They couldn't help but tremble all over. Chapter 685. I'll give you a chance to live. Whoever stands out now and confesses honestly, I'll let her go. Arbor said coldly, don't wait until I drag you out. At that time, even the Heavenly Emperor won't be able to save you. The last angry shout spread throughout the courtyard. Everyone felt their chests tighten and couldn't help but tremble. This group of servants usually had nothing to do. They ate her Qiao Estate's things and used her Qiao Estate's things, but in the end they still betrayed her. She told Wu Xiaosu that there were no more servants in her Nanju garden. Wu Xiaosu was sure that she would meddle in other people's business and save that woman. She made that woman beg her in front of everyone and told her to definitely accept that shrew for the sake of her face. Tsk, what a fantasy. She wanted to trick her? She would let them, these repulsive people, taste their own bitter fruits first. You won't speak? 7 to 8 dictum talismans floated in front of her. Arbor shouted coldly, I'll tell you, wait until I personally find out who betrayed me. Then you will have no way to live. Eldest Miss, please spare us. Eldest Miss, please spare us. The 2 servant girls who were hiding at the back of the crowd finally couldn't withstand the pressure and scrambled forward. They cried and kowtowed repeatedly. Chang Zai, who was at the side, broke out in a cold sweat. His legs were like noodles and his legs were trembling. These 2 audacious little girls really dared to provoke the lion in the sky. Arbor's eyes shot out a cold and sharp light. She hated betrayal the most in her life. Although these two servant girls' betrayal didn't cause her any real loss, this didn't mean that she would easily forgive them. She didn't fall into their trap because she was meticulous and saw through people. It could also be said that she had suffered in her previous life and accumulated experience. It wasn't because they were merciful. Originally there was no grudge between them. However, for a small profit, Xiao Qin threw away his bottom line as a person. Don't talk so much in the future. Let them eat it. Arbor threw out 2 pills, and the 2 black-clothed youths immediately understood. They took the pills and stepped forward, grabbed the 2 frightened and trembling servant girls, and forced them to swallow the pills. The 2 of them became mutes on the spot, unable to speak. 2 pairs of frightened eyes, with a trace of resentment, stared at Arbor. You're not convinced? Then I've changed my mind. Arbor looked coldly at the 2 girls who were glaring at him with hatred. Kill them. The 2 maidservants' pupils suddenly shrank. They opened their mouths but found that they couldn't make a sound. In the next second, 2 cold lights flashed past their necks, and a red liquid sprayed out. Everyone felt as if their hearts were being gripped tightly by something, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. In the future, if anyone dares to reveal any of the trivial matters of my Nanju garden to unrelated people, they will be punished. That's the outcome. If you can't control your mouth, then don't ask for another mouth in the future. Chunying. Chunying knelt on the ground with a plop, and said with fear and trepidation, Eldest Mississippi. This servant will scrupulously abide by her duties and won't dare to blabber nonsense. Arbor shook his head, looked at her and said, From now on, I'll give you the right to manage the household. Shayun, you'll replace Chunying and serve my mother. The 8 of you, starting from this month, your monthly allowance will be doubled. Arbor's words stunned the 8 maidservants who had arrived first. As for the rest of you, Arbor looked coldly at the servants who had arrived late. Putting on airs to the heavens, putting on airs even more than your masters. My Qiao estate can't afford to support you. Sell them all. Chapter 686. When the servants heard this, they felt as if the sky was about to collapse. They had been eating and living well in the Qiao estate for the past 2 years, and they were used to living a good life. Now that the Qiao estate had been promoted to a marquis estate, their lives were even more prosperous. Compared to the children of other poor families, they were all as comfortable as young masters and misses. Now, eldest miss actually wanted to drive them out with just one sentence? This time, everyone panicked and they only hated that they had offended eldest miss, this ancestor. This ancestor wasn't as easy to talk to as the other members of the Qiao family. She would poison them to mute them to kill them. Her swift and decisive methods were completely unlike the other people in the Qiao estate who were soft and docile. The servants all cried and begged for mercy. But how could Arbor care about them? She had given them a chance, but unfortunately only half of them grasped it. Since that was the case, she didn't need to be polite with them. It's so noisy, so annoying. Drive them all out. Arbor threw the name list on the table and beckoned to Chunying. Chunying hurriedly ran over and respectfully bowed to pick up the name list on the table. Cross out the names of the people who were driven out today. Also, check if there are enough people in the estate to clean. If there aren't enough, pick 2 or 3 honest people from the broker house. It doesn't matter if they are men or women as long as they are willing to work hard. Yes, Mississippi, Chunying was someone who could read. These 2 years she had always been by Madam's side helping to manage the household, so she naturally had some skills as a housekeeper. Arbor nodded. It will be the new year in 10 days. Tomorrow, go find a few people from the clothing workshop and buy 2 sets of winter clothes for the new year for each of the servants and boys. Calculate how much cloth is needed and report to me when the time comes. There is no harm in having more, but don't shortchange anyone. Chunying's mouth was slightly agape. Even the servants and manservants beside her were looking at their little mistress in a daze. Their master, who was still furious just now, was now softly talking about giving them more clothes for their monthly allowance, so that they could happily celebrate the new year. Yes, Mississippi, Chunying curtsied, her face beaming with joy as she agreed. Xiao Yao pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, her young miss was the easiest to get along with. As long as everyone did their jobs well and didn't cause trouble, her young miss wouldn't care what they did for the rest of their time. Standing to the side, Chang Zai, whose legs were still trembling, suddenly knelt down with a thud and weakly called out, Eldest Mississippi. At this time, Arbor's anger had already dissipated by half. When he turned to look at Chang Zai, his expression was a little better. You didn't manage your family well, and there were many incidents in your family. Do you know your crime? Eldest young miss, this old servant knows his wrongs. I beg eldest young miss not to chase this old servant out. Chang Zai trembled as he spoke. The gardener, Old Bai, who was on good terms with Chang Zai, also fell to his knees. He kowtowed and stammered, "Young miss, I can't double the monthly allowance. I beg young miss, don't kick big brother Chang out." They were all ordinary people and Chang Zai was already over 50 years old. If he was kicked out, he definitely wouldn't be able to find work. When the time came, there really wouldn't be any way to make a living. Sun Yang and the two of them were the first to enter the residence, so their friendship was naturally different. When she heard this, she also quickly knelt down and pleaded with Arbor. Xiao Mu looked at them expressionlessly, causing the trio's hearts to beat like a drum, feeling very uneasy. Chapter 687. Chang Zai was deeply afraid of implicating the two old fellows and hurriedly cried, "Eldest miss, please don't be angry at Old Bai and Sun Yang. This matter has nothing to do with them. I'll just leave." After saying this, he turned to leave with a hunched back. Arbor coldly called out, "Stop right there." Chang Zai's steps froze. Arbor glanced at the three. "So you two are willing to give up double your monthly allowance for Chang Zai?" Yes, eldest miss, we are willing." The two nodded in unison without hesitation. "You are also willing to leave the Chiao estate on your own. Will you bear a grudge against me?" Arbor raised her brows and looked at Chang Zai. Chang Zai hurriedly turned around and fell to his knees again. "This old servant does not dare. All these years, this old servant has received the Chiao estate's grace and has been taken care of by master and madam. Even if I leave the estate, I do not dare to betray my masters. Rise." Arbor speechlessly looked at the three of them. "When did I say that I wanted to drive you out of the estate?" Chang Zai, Old Bai, and Sun Yang were all startled and carefully thought back. That's right, when Miss had been angry just now, she had not said a single word about driving Chang Zai out. At most, she had ignored Steward Chang. "I removed you from your position as the steward only because I felt that you weren't too suited for the position of steward." Xiao Mu sighed as she explained, "Although you are indecisive in handling matters, you are a loyal and righteous person. You have followed my parents for so many years. Even if you have not performed meritorious deeds, you have still worked hard. How could I drive you out? Could it be that in your eyes I, your miss, am so unreasonable?" Chang Zai hurriedly said that he did not dare. Old Bai and Sun Yang were not good with words and could only follow Chang Zai's lead and say that they did not dare. "All right, all of you rise." Arbor moved her fingers and took out two small pouches. Xiao Yao pursed her lips and smiled. She knowingly took two small bags and walked over to Old Bai and Sun Yang. She handed them to them. "Here, this is a gift from Mississippi. Take it and calm your nerves." The two of them got up from the ground in a daze, each of them stupidly hugged a small bag and peeked inside. There were 2 pieces of ham inside. These days, meat was much more expensive than rice. This was a bountiful reward. Old Bai and Sun Yang both stared blankly at their little master. "Chang Zai, you have 2 very good friends." At this time, Chang Zai already knew that the young miss would not chase him out of the house, and his nerves were no longer as tense. Hearing this, he smiled from the bottom of his heart and nodded repeatedly. "From now on you can work at my parents' Li Jing garden." Arbor said faintly, "You're getting old. You can just ask me to do some trivial things." "Many thanks to Miss, many thanks to Mississippi." Chang Zai secretly wiped his old tears, his heart feeling more and more guilty. He didn't manage to cure the house, but the young miss did not blame him and even allowed him to stay. In the future, when he took care of the master and madam's small courtyard, he could not be so careless. He absolutely could not fail to live up to the young miss's trust in him. Arbor nodded and let them leave first. Chunying also took the remaining 2 servants and 2 manservants to leave, looking for the trafficker to choose servants. Soon, a black-clothed youth flashed to Arbor's side and whispered a few words to her. Arbor slightly raised an eyebrow, a cold light flashing through her eyes. "Wait for me to go out and take a look." "Master, the green mammy by the queen's side has been waiting for a long time." Arbor's footsteps paused and she nodded to the youth. "Go call her over." Chapter 688. Arbor waved his hand to dismiss the other hidden guards before leading a hidden guard named Lightning to the door. Lightning and Hui Feng, who served the crown prince, both came from the hidden guard camp, which was a bit different from the nature of the hidden night pavilion's work. Arbor finally understood everything now. Those with the word hidden in their names, such as Hidden Flower and Hidden Current, were all members of the hidden pavilion and specialized in assassinations. However, when those idiots were idle, they liked to visit the night pavilion to cause trouble. As for those with the word Yi in their names, such as Charming Night and Midnight Supper, They were all members of the Night Pavilion. Their main job was to travel to various large cities and towns to gather intelligence. Sometimes, they might even have to travel to faraway countries to gather all kinds of intelligence. The hidden guards from the Hidden Guard camp were usually the Crown Prince's bodyguards. Of course, when the Hidden Night Pavilion was very busy, the hidden guards might have to lend a hand or something. That the Crown Prince's Hidden Night Pavilion's Hidden Guard camp had been established for who knew how many years. Its scale was already very large, so it was quite easy for Arbor to use it directly. Especially the Hidden Guard camp. It was said that the Great King's father, the old Grand King, had directly passed it down to the Crown Prince when he was still alive. There were also some extraordinary people that Arbor had never seen before. Arbor had just arrived at the door with Lightning when he saw the manservant hugging his younger brother and refusing to let go. The manservant was wailing loudly, as if he wanted to vent all of his grievances. The slave trader stood to the side and watched awkwardly. Apart from the manservant who seemed to be on steroids and refused to leave Xiao Sen's side no matter how hard he tried, the other maids and manservants all shrank behind the slave trader listlessly, not daring to resist at all. Arbor raised his hand and pointed. Lightning's figure flashed, and he reached out to pick up the wailing manservant. Arbor waved at his younger brother. "You're back, sister." Xiao Sun was baffled by his manservant's crying as soon as he returned from the academy. When he saw Arbor standing at the door, he hastily ran over and pulled on his sister's hand, asking, "Sister, what happened? Why is Adong crying like this?" Arbor didn't hide it from him. He told his brother everything and then asked, "Do you want to keep this kind of servant who bullies his master?" The manservant hurriedly crawled to kneel in front of Xiao Sen and cried out, young master, you can't abandon this servant." Xiao Sen's little face flushed red. He went up and kicked the manservant. "How dare you be so disrespectful to my sister? You deserve to be sold. This young master doesn't have a wicked servant like you. Leave immediately. Let me tell you, even Big Brother Crown Prince has to listen to my sister. Of course, I am no exception. Even this young master had been ruthlessly beaten by my elder sister, let alone a manservant like you. You really have no discernment. You actually foolishly went against the wind and committed a crime. You're the biggest joke in the world, trying to challenge my elder sister? How capable do you think you are?" Our dear Xiao Sen was someone who knew when to yield and when not to yield. He had long discovered that his elder sister was the one in charge of the entire family. Even someone as powerful as his big brother had to listen to his elder sister. What kind of thing does a manservant like you think you are? How dare you climb all over his elder sister? You deserve to be scolded. Our dear Xiao Sen hurriedly drew a clear line between himself and the manservant, indicating that he wasn't on the same side as him. He pulled his sister towards the door. Chapter 689. This child had been raised by the old madam's side since he was young and had been spoiled to the point of being out of control. Fortunately, he was a little fearful of his older sister now, so she could still control him. Otherwise, it would be harder to teach him in the future. Arbor glanced at this mischievous child in amusement and exasperation. She shook her head and followed him through the door. Coincidentally, the green mammy was led all the way here. When she saw Arbor, her expression darkened slightly. She took a few steps forward and curtsied hastily. "Eldest Miss Chow, can we leave now?" "Oh, wait a moment," Arbor said carelessly. The green mammy's expression became even more unsightly. "Wait a moment? This old servant is afraid that this old servant can wait, but Her Majesty the Queen can't. How do you know whether Imperial Mother can wait or not?" Emolien's voice drifted in from the door. The green mammy was slightly alarmed. She quickly turned around and led the two junior palace maids to perform a standard curtsy to the Crown Prince. "Greetings, Your Highness." Arbor pattered to the Crown Prince and tugged at his sleeve. "Take me to the place where Wu Xiaosu is imprisoned." The Crown Prince nodded and turned to look at the green mammy and the others. "Go and reply to Imperial Mother first. Just tell her that we will come over in an hour." The green mammy's eyes narrowed slightly and she hastily said, "Your Highness, but..." The Crown Prince's cold gaze shot over and landed on the green mammy. "You don't understand?" The green mammy was so frightened that cold sweat dripped down. She hastily knelt on the ground with a thud and pressed her head firmly as she repeatedly said, Yes, this old servant understands." The Crown Prince held Arbor's small hand and walked out. Before they left, Arbor glanced at the kneeling green mammy, who was secretly peeking at her from the corner of her eye. Her lips curled in a cold smile. Wu Xiaosu had been imprisoned in the Supreme Court's prison for nearly 4 hours. The two people's carriage went straight to that place. When they arrived at the Supreme Court, the Xiaoqing had already received the news and came out to welcome them. He led the two people to the prison. The cell door opened and a long flight of stairs appeared under everyone's feet. Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince and tugged at his sleeve. The Crown Prince looked at her in amusement and whispered, "You're going down alone?" Arbor nodded. The Crown Prince looked at her helplessly. "What, are you still whispering to each other?" As he spoke, he turned to the Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court and said, "Let's stay here. Let the jailer open the door for the Crown Princess." "Yes, yes." Xiaoqing nodded repeatedly and pointed to a jailer to take Arbor away. Just as Arbor was about to leave, he turned around, raised a small hand, and suddenly pinched the Crown Prince's face. He muttered, "I don't like it when she looks at you and acts pitiful." Thinking of Wu Xiaosu's little white flower appearance, crying endlessly in front of the Crown Prince, Arbor felt unhappy in his heart. After he finished speaking, he left the petrified Crown Prince, Xiaoqing, and the others behind and followed the jailer. Huifeng. What should he do when he suddenly discovered that his master was being teased? The Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court was nearly 40 years old and usually felt that he was quite up to date with the times. At this moment, he snapped out of his petrification and snuck a glance at the Crown Prince. When he saw the latter's smile and joyful expression, he instantly felt that his mentality had been through a lot. Young people nowadays really knew how to flirt with their partners. "Your Highness, how about we go up first? This humble subject will order someone to serve tea." He didn't know how long the Crown Princess was going to chat with Miss Wu, but he couldn't let the Crown Prince keep standing at the top of the stairs. Chapter 690. Crown Prince the Great? After calling him 3 times, the Crown Prince still didn't have much of a reaction and only kept smiling. On the side, Huifeng's mouth twitched and he coughed lightly. Xiaoqing, go and prepare first. His Highness will be there in a moment." "Yes, yes." The Supreme Court's Xiaoqing hastily retreated. Huifeng couldn't help but cover his face. Oh no, Master was flirted silly again. The Supreme Court's Xiaoqing didn't see it, but when he looked over, he saw that Master's ears were red. Sigh, these days were so hard. The Crown Princess casually flirted, and my Crown Prince's soul left his body. "Your Highness." Don't stand at the top of the stairs and smile foolishly. Xiaoqing invites you over for tea." Huifeng helplessly poked the Crown Prince. Emolian returned to her senses and blinked her phoenix eyes. "Where's Jojo?" Huifeng almost missed a step and rolled down the stairs. The Crown Princess, who ran off after flirting, had no idea that she had flirted a man silly with 1 sentence. Under the jailer's lead, they arrived at the door of an independent prison cell. This type of prison cell used to imprison mystic cultivators was of a higher level, and there was an additional confinement talisman matrix on the cell door. Normal mystic cultivators couldn't escape from this prison filled with confinement talisman matrices if they wore specially made shackles and handcuffs. However, it was said that Ding Ting Ding escaping from prison was a common occurrence. Even if you had 17 or 18 talisman matrices, escaping from prison was a matter of minutes for him. The prison cells on both sides were empty, and Wu Xiaosu was being held in this one. The jailer brought Arbor to the door of the prison cell. Under Arbor's signal, he opened the door for her and tactfully retreated far away. Arbor stepped through the door and her gaze landed on Wu Xiaosu, who was huddled in the corner. Wu Xiaosu looked up when she heard footsteps. When she saw that the person walking against the light was Arbor, her eyes abruptly widened, and she pounced at Arbor like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. However, when she was several steps away from Arbor, her figure was abruptly pulled to a stop by 2 iron chains. Her arms were firmly bound by 2 iron chains on the wall. She could only bare her fangs and brandish her claws at Arbor, but she could never reach her. Arbor stood in front of Wu Xiaosu and looked at her indifferently. "I couldn't figure out why you kept trying to get close to our Qiao family." Later, the Crown Prince secretly told her that the palace maid who poisoned her at the banquet had a brief contact with Princess Anam. This goal was already very clear. Princess Anam wanted to avenge her good daughter, Commandery Princess Hui An. The vassal king consort of Anan. Wu Hongma is your aunt, right? Wu Hongma had been plotting against her since the day of the banquet. What a whimsical woman. He wanted to give her a slow-acting poison so that she would eventually die unknowingly. That way the Crown Prince wouldn't be suspicious. This method of poisoning was simple and crude. It could be said that if she succeeded, it would be a good plan. Unfortunately, no matter how much she calculated, she overlooked the fact that Xiao Mu was also well versed in the study of poison and had read thousands upon thousands of poison scriptures. This kind of concealed slow-acting poison might be quite stealthy and undetectable to other people, but to Xiao Mu, it was truly too common. Wu Xiaosu was ordered by Wu Hongma to pretend to get close to the Qiao family so that she could enter the family and find an opportunity to continue poisoning Arbor with slow-acting poison. Unfortunately, second Miss Qiao didn't like her from the start. Eldest Miss Qiao was as cold as ice and unapproachable, so she didn't have a chance. Chapter 691. As a result, she found someone to put on a show to trick Arbor. If the trick succeeded, Arbor would take pity on that shrew and bring her back. Naturally, she would have a chance to hibernate by Arbor's side and slowly continue to spread the poison. However, it was a pity that this Wu Xiaosu was young and impatient in the end. She was too impatient to handle matters properly, so Qiao Mu easily saw through her. Arbor flipped his hand and a small golden cicada appeared in front of Wu Xiaosu's eyes. When she saw the golden cicada, panic flitted across her eyes. Her entire body shook as she howled, "Arbor, what are you doing? I want to see Her Majesty the Queen. I want to see the Empress Dowager. I've been wrongly accused. Your so-called witnesses and evidence are just rumors and rumors. I didn't engrave the Wu family seal on the inside of the rice bag." This was a blatant attempt to frame him. Arbor slightly curled his lips and didn't answer. Instead, he moved his finger and a body immobilization talisman floated out. Wu Xiaosu's entire body was cold. She opened her mouth in shock, but suddenly felt that her entire body couldn't move. With a slight flick of Arbor's finger, that small golden cicada flew into Wu Xiaosu's mouth and slid down her throat. Wu Xiaosu's eyes were filled with horror. If her entire body wasn't frozen, she would have already collapsed to the ground, trembling. Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. Didn't Wu Xiaosu have that stupid woman on the street follow her home and wait for an opportunity to get close to her bedroom? She wanted to stuff this poisonous golden cicada under her bed and let it emit poisonous gas over time? Why go through so much trouble? Just directly feed it to Wu Xiaosu and let it play its role in Wu Xiaosu's stomach. After Arbor finished dealing with Wu Xiaosu, he left her frozen like this. He didn't even help her resolve her predicament and leisurely left. When the two entered the palace hand in hand to see the queen, eldest Madame Wu's eyes were swollen from crying. Princess Anam even held back a belly full of anger and drank tea for 4 hours. Without waiting for Princess Anam to make a fuss, the Crown Prince ordered people to bring the witnesses and material evidence to the Queen and state the facts. Seeing the Queen's silence, Senior Madame Wu became anxious. Xiaosu is still a virgin and is the Princess Consort's niece. Wouldn't it be a disgrace to the Wang clan if they were imprisoned like this? Besides, she was just a child and had accidentally offended the Crown Princess. The Crown Princess hasn't suffered any losses yet, so why can't she just take a step back? A country has its laws and a family has its rules. Are you looking down on the law? The Crown Prince said indifferently, 3 months in prison is already a light punishment. Could it be that eldest Madame Wu wants your daughter to be beheaded for the crime of disrespect? I hope that after Miss Wu is released from prison this time, the Wu family will properly control her words and actions. Don't make any more mistakes, otherwise we won't let her off easily. The next day, the Queen still wanted to persuade her son to let Miss Wu go. After all, girls were prideful. Wouldn't it make people laugh to death if she came out of prison after 3 months? In the end, she received news that her son had left the capital early in the morning with his wife for Bailon. It was already the new year, yet they were still going out. Queen Zhao was so angry that she cursed her for raising a fake son. At this time, the young couple was already in the suburbs and had ridden on the same horse for some distance. From afar, they saw a small team of 7 to 8 people running toward the city gate in a fluster. Behind them was a large group of zombies that were running crookedly. There were at least 30 to 40 zombies. Although their running speed wasn't slow, they were all missing arms and legs, and their postures were twisted. Chapter 692. However, this batch of zombies moved at the same speed as a normal person. If there were no mishaps, it should be a batch of level 3 zombies. The squad of 7 to 8 people fled in a panic. From afar, they saw the Crown Prince and Arbor foolishly standing still with their horses in front of them. In their panic, they glanced at the two of them and silently criticized them. They felt that they were 2 young people who had been scared silly. Otherwise, why didn't they run when they saw such a large batch of zombies? They even foolishly placed their horses in the middle of the road. Why are there so many zombies? The little girl asked crisply. Arbor really hadn't seen so many zombies moving together in a long time. In the area around Guanlan City, there were basically mystic cultivator squads going out on missions every day to purge the nearby zombies. It was already good enough to occasionally see one or two zombies on the road, so it was truly surprising to see such a small batch of zombies. These people's luck was really good. Seeing the 7 to 8 people running closer and closer, Arbor stared at the tall, plump, middle-aged uncle in the lead with a slightly strange gaze. "Captain?" A fierce scream came from behind him. The tall fatty turned around and saw a tall zombie missing an arm already close to the back of his head. 2 protruding fangs appeared in its huge mouth, looking especially cold and eerie. "Fuck." Without any explanation, the tall fatty raised the fire tongs in his hand and firmly smacked the pouncing zombie's face. The zombie's eyeball immediately flew out of its left eye socket. "Hurry and run, little girl." A chubby auntie beside the tall fatty was also doing her best to run. The moment she opened her mouth, she spat at Arbor and Emolien, gesturing for them to quickly turn around and run into the city. Although the chubby auntie was wide and fat, she was very agile and abnormally fast. She was a speed-type superpower user. Seeing them running over in a hurry, Arbor's beautiful eyes scanned the faces of the 8 people in the squad. The more he looked, the more radiant his eyes became. "What are you looking at?" Emolien reached out and pulled the little fellow's face back. This child was staring at her without blinking. Was he really that good-looking? The team consisted of 8 people, young and old, men and women, all of whom looked ordinary. He really didn't know why his Jojo couldn't take his eyes off them. "Come over quickly." Xiao Mu waved her hand at Fatty Gao and company. "Hurry, hurry." Fatty Gao's mouth twitched. "Little girl, run. Don't just stand there. We really can't handle these dozens of level 3 corpse puppets. Get down, all of you." The little guy waved his hand forcefully. Everyone looked at her in confusion, only to see the fair and tender little girl take out a round thing from her sleeve. Emolien's eyebrows twitched slightly. She was just about to grab the little fellow's little hand. The round core ravaging thunder had already been thrown out by her and landed in the midst of the zombie horde. Boom! A huge explosion shook the earth and the mountains. The 8 people in the squad rolled on the ground with stupefied expressions. They hugged their heads and lay on the ground, looking up at the little girl who was leaving. "Huge Bear Squad, wait for me to come back. See you?" The little girl hugged the youth's waist and turned to wave at the group of people lying on the ground. "Who dares to be so impudent at Guanlan City's north gate?" Several angry rebukes were mixed with several fierce figures flying out of the city gate. Chapter 693. The 8 members of Huge Bear Squad continued to lie there motionlessly, holding their heads as they stared ahead in a daze. The core-ravaging thunder had blasted a huge crater in front of them, and none of the 30-odd zombies were spared. All of them were blown to smithereens. Several mystic experts stationed at Guanlan City's north gate flew out of the city and were stunned when they saw this scene. The members of Huge Bear Squad slowly crawled up from the ground after a long while. Everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. "Captain WWR Huge Bear Squad is so famous now? Even a random little girl passing by can call out our Huge Bear Squad's name?" 2 lumps of red appeared on a young team member's face in excitement. Huge Bear Squad's captain, Gao Xing, irritably slapped the back of that team member's head. "What nonsense are you spouting? It must be because she saw the badges we're wearing on our chests." Everyone looked down. The Huge Bear badge wasn't very obvious, and the bear carved on the badge wasn't mighty. To be honest, could that girl really tell that this badge was a huge bear? What exactly happened here? A mystic guarding the city solemnly looked at Captain Gao Sheng. Gao Sheng smiled foolishly and rubbed the back of his head. "It's just that just now, our squad accidentally attracted a group of zombies to chase after us. An expert passed by and helped us take care of the zombies. Right, we're the Huge Bear Squad that went to the North Slope to dig up wild vegetables. Now that the mission is complete, we plan to return to the city." The mystic guarding the city looked at the badges on their chests and nodded. "According to the rules, you guys will first stay in the tent area outside the city for a few days. You can only enter the city when it's about time." Okay. Everyone understood the rules, so Gao Xing nodded without objection. Only then did he lead his teammates to the tent area at the North City Gate. Besides, after the little fellow did something bad, Emolien knew that this action would definitely alarm the city guards, so she quickly rode away with this little ancestor. Arbor was in a great mood and was snickering like a little mouse the entire way. Emolien helplessly stroked the little fellow's head. With such a loud explosion, the nearby zombies have all been drawn over. Arbor turned his little head to look at him. Action teams have missions to do so they can eat. Moreover, there were probably less than 100 undead puppets within 100 miles of Guanlan City. The ones that needed to be cleaned up had all been cleaned up by the operation teams. Emolien couldn't help but laugh. Do you want little Seven to take us there? No need. Didn't you say that it would take less than a day to ride a horse to Balon City? Yes, at this speed we'll be there in the evening. Then let's take a look along the way. The little fellow took out a packet of osmanthus candy from her pocket and put one in Emolien's mouth. Prince Emo couldn't tell what the candy tasted like, but the little girl's soft and greasy little finger brushed against his lips. It felt soft and was incredibly sweet. On the other side, at the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate, a quick-witted boy servant quickly walked into the hall and saluted the lord and madam at the head of the table. Lord and madam, there are guests outside who claim to be members of your family. Xiao Zhongbang, who had just finished eating and was looking at his son's recent homework, paused while holding a book. Wei Ziqin also looked up and couldn't help but frown. Chapter 694. Clansmen of the main clan? Wasn't that? Ah. Zhongbang, why didn't you tell the main clan that you've moved to Guanlan City for so long? A laugh came from outside the door. You can't just barge in. The sound was mixed with the footboy's anxious cry. Master, madam, they... Xiao Zhongbang looked up and saw an elderly man in his 60s leading two middle-aged men who were slightly older than him through the door. The elderly man smiled and nodded repeatedly at him. Clan head. Xiao Zhongbang and his wife stood up and greeted the elderly man with an indifferent expression. They waved their hands to dismiss the footboy. It wasn't that they hadn't contacted the main clan after moving here for so long. It was that when they had moved here back then, the husband and wife had brought gifts and visited with Qiao Zhongxing the next day, wanting to contact the main clan. In the end, they had been stopped outside by several snobbish gatekeepers. At that time, Xiao Zhongbang and Xiao Zhongbang had even met the middle-aged man on the left behind the elderly man. When that person heard that they were a branch of the Qiao clan from Quoto village, he didn't even look at the husband and wife and directly had them driven away, not even allowing them to finish speaking. This matter had left a shadow in the hearts of Xiao Zhongbang and his brother. In the 2 years since they had moved to Guanlan City, they had never paid a visit to the Qiao clan's main clan head again. Hey, why are you treating me like an outsider by calling me clan head? The Qiao clan's main clan head, Qiao Donghua, smiled and waved his hand. Zhongbang, I also watched you grow up. In terms of seniority, I am your eldest uncle. There's no need to treat me like an outsider by calling me clan head. Xiao Zhongbang said neither coldly nor warmly, I don't dare. We two brothers are farmers from Quoto village in a remote and desolate area. We don't dare to have any relationship with the main clan. If there's nothing else, please leave. Clan head Xiao Donghua's old face stiffened. The two middle-aged men behind him were furious, especially the man on the left. When he heard Xiao Zhongbang's voice, he realized that he had met this person 2 years ago. However, at that time, Xiao Zhongbang and his wife were dressed very plainly. At first glance, one could tell that they were country bumpkins from the countryside. Unlike now, they were dressed in silk and satin. Zhongbang, we are all clansmen of the same clan. There is no need to be so calculative. Clan head Xiao Donghua said with a calm face, what happened 2 years ago, it's all because of that little servant boy who was guarding the door. He didn't understand the ways of the world. Don't worry, I'll deal with them as soon as we get back. No need. Xiao Zhongbang waved his hand, turned around and pulled his wife into the inner hall. I'm sorry, I have something to discuss with my wife, so I won't see you off. This old man still dared to bring up the incident from 2 years ago in front of them, which meant that he already knew about it. However, at that time, Xiao Zhongbang and his brother were only good-for-nothings in the main clan's eyes. How could the main clan ever care about them? Xiao Donghua was so angry that his mouth crooked, and he brought his 2 sons out of the Marquis' estate with his tail between his legs. Xiao Zhongda immediately cursed, Dad. He's only a good-for-nothing who obtained the Marquis title because he sold his daughter for glory. Does our Qiao family still need to rely on him? A good-for-nothing, a good-for-nothing. A good-for-nothing is about to break through to the peak of level 7 Mystic Cultivator realm. What about you? You're just a mere level 6 Mystic Cultivator, yet you keep calling someone else a good-for-nothing. The clan head's words shocked Xiao Zhongda. Earlier, he was only concerned about being angry and didn't pay attention to Xiao Zhongbang's cultivation at all. Chapter 695. What do you know? I heard that this future crown princess is deeply doted on by the crown prince. She herself is also a very capable child. If she can return to our clan. Reputation, status, resources, wouldn't they have everything they could wish for? He heard that His Highness the Crown Prince frequently sent gifts to Qiao Zhongbang and his wife, being incredibly diligent. Qiao Zhongda only felt his teeth ache as he muttered softly, but they have to be willing to come back first. Looking at Qiao Zhongbang and his wife's attitudes, it was impossible. Isn't it all your fault? Qiao Dongbo was so angry that he kicked his eldest son. You're such a blind thing. You offended that couple for no reason. I'm telling you, you have to think of a way for me. No matter how you beg, you have to invite that couple back to the main family. I want to see that child Arbor's figure in the Qiao family competition after the Lantern Festival. A strange glint flashed through Qiao Dongbo's eyes. This Crown Prince's section break, clatter clatter clatter. The little white horse galloped happily, galloping up the slope with the young couple on its back. When it was close to noon, the young couple had already galloped the entire way. With the Crown Prince carrying her in his arms, Arbor's hair and clothes were clean, neat, and elegant, without the slightest speck of dust. Moreover, she was jolting on the horse, already wanting to sleep. Not long after descending the slope, the two people stopped at the entrance of a small village. There should already be no one in this village. After all, the people nearby had either moved to Balon fortifications or definitely moved to the nearby Mo Kingdom capital. Who would stay in such a withered, small, and dilapidated village? Moreover, there were hidden dangers in terms of safety. Who could guarantee that zombies wouldn't suddenly break through the window in the middle of the night? Pass through this village? Emolienne lowered her head to look at the sleepy little fellow who was nodding incessantly, and she couldn't help but find it funny. Arbor reluctantly glanced at this village. From here, the village was very dilapidated, with broken walls and dilapidated walls, and there weren't many intact houses inside. Isn't it closer if we go from here? It should be, Emolienne nodded, but this village looks a little spooky, don't be afraid. How am I scared? Arbor snorted and looked down at the little white snake that poked its little head out of his waist pocket. She had mentally prepared herself for half a day before she finally made up her mind to bring the little white snake along. There was no other reason. She had to work hard to get rid of the psychological shadow of the past. She couldn't just run away in fear when someone threw out a Shen beast snake when she was fighting with someone in the future. This was too fucking cowardly. He had to overcome it. In addition, the little white snake kept looking at her with a pitiful gaze that said, "Please don't give up." Xiaomu felt a little helpless. Along the way, the little white snake was very obedient. It curled up in her waist pocket and poked its little head out to look at the scenery. It didn't make a single sound. Arbor subconsciously reached out and stroked the little snake's round head. The little white snake immediately rubbed its head against her small hand excitedly. At this time, Prince Emo had already urged his horse into the village. As soon as the two entered the village, they thoroughly sensed the desolation of this place. Let alone people, it was impossible to even have a single bird in this kind of place. To put it bluntly, even a mouse would probably starve to death if it took root here. Arbor's large eyes darted back and forth, blinking nimbly. Suddenly she heard a faint sound. Chapter 696. The two of them turned their heads and instantly saw a bony claw reaching out from the crack in the wall. The claw was black and thin, covered in blue veins, and looked especially frightening. If a normal person saw it, they would fall off their horse in fright. But the young couple only looked at each other, then continued to watch the hand slowly reach out from the crack in the wall. Then came half a head covered in dust and dirt, and half a body so thin that it was all skin and bones. A pitiful man with a somewhat deformed head and a body as thin as a bean sprout crawled out from the corner of the earth. When his gaze met the young couple's, he was clearly stunned, and his entire body froze on the spot. There was actually someone here? Arbor carefully looked at the person, and after examining him, he confirmed that this was a person and not a corpse puppet. Although he looked a little deformed, he was most likely skinny from hunger. His eyes were strong and his limbs were agile, so he was clearly not a corpse puppet. Emolienne reached out and grabbed, and the man who was so thin that he was almost out of shape was brought up in front of him. "Who are you? Why are you hiding there so sneakily?" That person called out "Ba bie bie bie" twice, and his face revealed a slightly frightened expression. He repeatedly kowtowed to the two of them and begged for mercy. He was actually a mute. A mute hiding in this shabby village and still being able to live for so long. It was really unknown how he spent his days to become so thin. Emolienne flipped off his horse and walked over to the crack in the wall that the mute had crawled out from to look. There seemed to be a cellar down there, and the mute probably slept in that cellar every day. "I'll go down and take a look, Jojo." Emolienne pointed down. Arbor nodded and retracted his gaze to look suspiciously at the mute. "Are you really a mute?" The mute made two short, ah sounds and his voice was also very hoarse. Arbor flipped his finger, and suddenly threw a body-securing talisman at him. Suddenly the mute nimbly dodged to the side, and fiercely dodged the talisman. He flipped his hand and threw a handful of dust at Arbor. Arbor's lips curled into a sinister smile. With a light swipe of his fingertips, several streams of water rushed out, directly washing away all the dust that Mute had scattered over. Mute was clearly taken aback, and his huge pupils contracted slightly. Water spirit? Impossible. How could such a young girl be a spirit master? That deformed Mute suddenly opened his mouth, and a snake's forked tongue abruptly darted out of his mouth. It wriggled and darted straight for Qiao Mu's small face. Arbor didn't expect the Mute in front of him to do such a disgusting thing. The snake's tongue was thick and fat, red with a tinge of black. It suddenly swept towards her face. In the blink of an eye, Arbor's finger trembled slightly and his mystic energy seeped into the defensive ring on his fingertip, opening the eggshell in an instant. Thud. The snake's forked tongue hit the defensive barrier and made a soft sound. The serpent man retracted his tongue in pain, turned around and ran away. Arbor let out a sigh of relief, only feeling that she had been disgusted. A white light flashed, and the little snake suddenly jumped out of Arbor's waist pocket. It passed through the defensive barrier without any hindrance, and directly bit the back of Mute's neck. Ah! Mute let out a low, hoarse cry, and suddenly threw himself onto the ground. He slithered forward like a snake, struggling in his death throes. The little white snake's bite was very fierce, and in a flash, black smoke came out of Mute's body. Chapter 697. Mute's body was like a sieve. Small holes appeared all over his body, all of which were emitting black smoke. This black smoke came from his body. Gradually he was enveloped by this thick black smoke, and his figure couldn't be seen clearly. When Emolienne jumped up from the cellar, she saw this scene and jumped in fright. She quickly rushed to Arbor and pulled her into her arms. What's going on? What could happen to me? Arbor pouted and pointed at Mute. He's the one who's in trouble. The white snake slithered out of the black smoke and softly pounced onto Arbor's hand, rubbing against her fingers cutely. Arbor stroked its head. Emolienne, the white snake, bit him, and this person's whole body emitted black smoke. What kind of special skill is this? Emolienne gazed deeply at the white snakelet. The white snake wasn't to be outdone. It raised its head and swept a disdainful glance at Lord Emo with its round eyes. This is the dark power of the netherworld. It's one of the 3 extremely strong and strange powers outside of the 5 spirits. It hasn't appeared for close to 1,000 years. I once read about it in the mysterious records of the upper 3 continents. There are only a few words about the description of the power of the netherworld. When the white snake heard this, it shook its head and looked at Arbor with an expression that said, praise me, pet me." Arbor was a little amused. She raised her hand and stroked its little head. This power of the netherworld also has a special power. Anyone killed by the power of the netherworld will be able to control the dead person's movements for a certain period of time, depending on the user's control of the power of the netherworld, Emolienne explained. At this time, after the black smoke dissipated, they saw Mute with his head drooping. He moved step by step in front of them. When he raised his head, his pair of eyes were gray. His long snake-like tongue curled and stuck out. Demonic cultivator. Emolienne looked at Mute with a cold expression. He's already dead. Jojo, should we leave now or go down and take a look? Let's go down and take a look. We can let this person lead the way. Arbor's eyes lit up. Emolienne nodded. The cellar is connected to other places, but it seems to be connected in all directions. Without a guide we may have to take a lot of detours. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Arbor was curious about the underground world. The two of them let Mute lead the way down the cellar. When they were brought to a rather large underground village, they couldn't help but be stunned. If they hadn't bumped into this Mute crawling out from the crack in the wall, they wouldn't have known that there was another path below the cellar and that there was a village built below. Emolienne narrowed her eyes. Such an underground village had appeared so close to the Emo Kingdom capital. Before this, not even the slightest bit of news had leaked out. This was truly a bit unusual and it made him vigilant. When Mute led them into the village, 2 burly men walked up to them and said with a smile, "Yo, you're back. You brought back 2 fat lambs so quickly? Not bad." As they spoke, their eyes rolled in circles as they stared at this pair of fat lambs in amazement. This graceful appearance, tsk. A handsome man and a beautiful woman. If they were presented to the village chief, then Mute would definitely receive great praise. Mute didn't make a sound. Even the occasional ah sounds that he usually made were gone. However, no one paid attention to it. Chapter 698. Mute ignored them and led Arbor and Emolien straight into the village. There were over 100 families in the village. When they saw outsiders enter, they all came over to watch. Men and women, old and young, dressed strangely, their eyes revealing traces of ill intentions. Arbor expressionlessly swept his gaze over them and followed behind Mute with Emolien for a while. "Ah, my guests who have come from afar. Welcome." A deep and resounding laughter came from afar. A sturdy man was surrounded by many people and slowly walked towards Arbor's group. "Village Chief. Village Chief." The rest of the people respectfully bowed to the village chief. This man was about 30 years old and had a rather tall stature. His bright and spirited eyes swept over Xiao Mu and Emolien, and when he saw the two people's faces clearly, disbelief also flitted across his eyes. Such graceful and elegant people, they didn't look simple at all. How could they be so easily caught by Mute? "Mute, these two people, where did you find them?" Mute was silent and didn't make a sound. He only lowered his head and didn't say anything. "Chem? Why aren't you saying anything?" The man looked suspiciously at Mute, who had lowered his head. Usually, even though a Mute couldn't speak, he could at least make some gestures to explain what he was talking about. A clear laughter like a silver bell entered everyone's ears, closely followed by a fragrant wind. The woman who walked over quickly was about 27 or 28 years old. Her voluptuous figure was tightly wrapped in a thin red short skirt. She was dressed in an exotic attire, revealing two long white legs. "Oh, where did such a cute little girl come from? Come to Big Sister quickly." That woman twisted her snake-like waist and swept in front of Arbor like a whirlwind. She hooked her hand and was about to pull Arbor into her embrace. Prince Emo didn't say anything and kicked at the woman. What protective feelings for the fairer sex. There was no such thing. That the kick was vicious and accurate, aiming straight for the woman's thigh. Xiao Mu had originally thought that the woman's leg would definitely break with a crack, but who would have expected that the woman's leg would be as soft as a noodle, as if it had been stripped of its bones, and it actually evaded Crown Prince Mo's kick. "Stinky man. Go away." The woman's expression changed as she took 2 steps back. She hurriedly took out a handkerchief from her bosom and wiped it. Her thigh was not touched at all. Arbor. This was the first time she saw a woman who hated the Crown Prince so much. The Crown Prince's expression was also very ugly. He pulled his baby into his arms with one hand and raised his other hand to gently pat her back to comfort her. The big man looked at Emolien and Arbor with even more confusion. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a short man who quickly jumped over and landed in front of them. "Rabbit 3, what's the matter?" The short man called Rabbit 3 grinned and said, "Village Chief, Mother Zhen and the others are back. They said that they're going to have a barbecue feast tonight. Let everyone in the village get ready." Okay. Everyone cheered in unison as if that barbecue feast was very interesting. Arbor's eyes flashed slightly and he secretly poked Little Snake with his finger. The little snake gave Mute an order and Mute lowered his head, bringing the two of them back to his house. The village chief and the others were busy preparing for that barbecue feast and didn't make things difficult for them. Chapter 699. It could be seen that everyone had a long-lost excitement on their faces, which made Arbor somewhat curious. What barbecue feast? It made the entire village seem like it was New Year's in advance as everyone busied themselves. Because this barbecue feast would only be held at night, Arbor and Emolien followed Mute back to his room. Upon returning to his room, Mute collapsed limply onto the ground, motionless. Little Snake's nether energy can only be controlled for so long. We have to be careful in our actions from now on. Emolien grasped Arbor's small hand and said, "This village is very strange." I took a look. Quite a few people here seem to be demonic cultivators. Especially that woman just now. Her entire body was very soft. If he didn't guess wrongly, she should have fused with some kind of snake bone, which caused her body to be abnormally soft. What in the world is this village where demonic cultivators congregate trying to do by hiding underground? Although proper mystic cultivators or ordinary martial artists were not willing to get close to people like demonic cultivators were no longer discriminated against ever since operation squads were established. On the contrary, many squads were very happy to take in demonic cultivators with special abilities and participate in missions together. Since everyone was slowly starting to try to accept demonic cultivators as a group. Then why were these demonic cultivators still sneakily hiding underground, unwilling to show their faces under the sun? Say, do you think someone is deliberately raising these people underground? Arbor muttered softly, and the crown prince's brows knitted tightly. If there really was a mastermind behind the scenes, why would they raise such a large group of demonic cultivators underground near the Emo Kingdom capital? In that case, this question was really worth investigating. The two people did not go out. During this time, several people tried to knock on Mute's door, but the two people ignored them. Only when it was 10 minutes into the night did Emolien and Arbor open the door and follow the crowd's footsteps, surging toward the underground village's central gathering place. The two people mingled in the crowd, following behind unhurriedly. When they arrived at the gathering place, they saw a dense mass of heads, at least 1,000 people. There were actually more than 1,000 people hidden in this underground village. At least half of them were demonic cultivators, while the rest were mostly ordinary people with shackles on their legs and hands. Apart from the excitement on the faces of those demonic cultivators, most of the ordinary people had numb expressions on their faces. Their eyes were dull as they were urged forward by the demonic cultivators. They were like a group of slaves who would move forward or backward if their master wanted them to. Many benches were placed around the plaza. The group of demonic cultivators each led the slaves in their hands and sat down in an orderly manner. At a glance, the group of people had surrounded the assembly hall. Some of the demonic masters were leading a dozen or so slaves, while some were only leading a few. There were men and women, old and young, among these slaves. All of them had tattered clothes and messy hair as they knelt at the feet of the demonic masters. Quiet, all of you, quiet down. The village head raised his hand and stopped the crowd from talking. Everyone quieted down. That snake beauty from before swayed her slender waist as she walked forward with her clothes exposed. She stood next to the village head and laughed coquettishly. The barbecue feast will now begin. Everyone can forget about everything and start partying. Everyone let out excited shrieks as they vigorously swung the long chains that were leading the slaves. Chapter 700. The sound of rolling wheels rolling on the ground came in their direction. Arbor and Emolien raised their eyes, only to see 3 enormous grills being pushed out. The so-called barbecue was 3 people skewered on the grills. 2 ordinary people with numb expressions stood on both sides of the grills, continuously flipping the skewered people on the grills. Arbor almost vomited when she saw it, her little head suddenly burying into the crown prince's embrace. Although the crown prince was also very nauseous, nothing could be seen on his face. His gaze was cold as he looked at this group of demons who were laughing maniacally. The 3 people were already beyond recognition. Blood dripped from their bodies and the roasted fat sizzled. It was obvious that they had been barbecued for a long time and were already thoroughly dead. Big brother, second brother, third brother. A mournful cry came from the foot of a demonic master in the front row. A slave led by that demonic master suddenly rushed forward, roaring angrily as he wanted to pounce on the 3 grills. A female demonic cultivator who was holding the chain suddenly pulled on the metal chain with a chuckle. After a series of clangs, the bald little fatty who had been calling for his brother was pulled to the ground with a bang. He smashed the ground with both his hands in anger and despair as he cried bitterly. "Ah-ha-ha-ha." The female demonic master laughed enchantingly. She got up and tugged on the iron chain in her hand, dragging the bald brat to her side. Sharp spikes abruptly shot out from her 5 fingers, and she grabbed a piece of flesh from the brat's arm with a whoosh. "Brat, you should thank me for not handing you over for tonight's barbecue feast." "Ah." The female demonic master stepped on the bald brat's back, using all her strength to stomp on the big iron pot on his back. She giggled as she trembled. "What, big brother, second brother, third brother? You are now my little slave. You only have a master." "Ah." Arbor poked her little head out from Emolien's embrace, her fists involuntarily clenched tightly. Emolien, who could sense the change in her mood, hurriedly reached out to pacify her, whispering in her ear, "Wait a moment." The iron pot brat let out a series of roars and cries of despair as he was stepped on by the female demonic body master. His 10 fingers continuously dug into the ground. "Deske, how boring. You only know how to scream at the top of your lungs. Can't you do anything else? Jinji, you're really brutal." A few demonic cultivators by the side teased. "Village head. Let's have some entertainment." Right. The last time he dissected a living person it was really nice." "Ah." The village chief laughed and put his hands on his hips, revealing his bulging chest muscles. "How about we do something more exciting today? Do you want to see it? Yes. The group of demonic masters below shook their chains and screamed excitedly. The village head let out an evil laugh. He suddenly stretched out his hands and clapped his hands 3 times. A low growl could be heard as a dark-skinned woman slowly pushed a wheelbarrow into the arena. The wheelbarrow carried a large square iron cage, and inside it was actually a tied-up level 4 zombie. The level 4 zombie opened its mouth, revealing 2 terrifying fangs. Its eyes were bloodshot as it roared angrily at the fresh meat on the field. Ah! Everyone laughed maniacally in excitement. This is a level 4 zombie that absorbed all the power of a level 6 mystic cultivator. Its current ability is equivalent to a level 4 mystic cultivator. Chapter 701. The skinny dark woman tugged on the chain in her hand. After a series of rattling noises, the level 4 zombie in the cage threw itself against the iron cage, smashing against the pillar as it roared angrily. A group of demonic cultivators stood up with excitement in their eyes, raising their hands one after another as they shouted, "Me, me, me! Let me do it, let me do it! Why don't I see Mute? Where's the little sister that Mute brought back?" The snake beauty walked over from the center of the plaza, twisting her slender waist as her gaze slowly swept over everyone. When her gaze fell on Arbor, her eyes clearly brightened. But when she saw Emolien sitting beside Arbor, her brows involuntarily furrowed. She had a premonition that this man didn't look simple. "Where's your master?" The snake beauty twisted her enchanting slender waist as she approached Arbor and Emolien step by step. According to the rules of their village, whoever picked up someone would be that person's slave. Of course, if you wanted to present it to the village chief, that was also fine. If it was some good prey, presenting it to the village chief would make him happy, and perhaps even exchange it for better treatment. "Where's that Mute?" The snake beauty looked at the 2 of them suspiciously. She raised a slender finger, tilted her neck, and lightly tapped her fair chin. "There's no way that Mute would let the 2 of you come here alone. What's going on?" Arbor didn't pay attention to the snake beauty's thin screeching. Her gaze was fixed on the face of the skinny dark woman behind the wheelbarrow. A faint ripple appeared in the depths of her cold eyes. Although that woman had slimmed down quite a bit and tanned quite a bit, Xiaomu still recognized her with a glance. The skinny dark woman gestured for the 2 of them to come forward and dragged the level 4 zombie out of the cage. That level 4 zombie shook its 2 arms with all its might, vainly trying to break free from its bindings. Its 2 tightly bound claws were twisting and scratching randomly. The 2 demonic cultivators wore iron wrist guards on their arms, so they weren't afraid of the level 4 zombie's touch, but their faces still carried a bit of disgust. Ah! The female demonic cultivator by the name of Jinji pulled the rolling and crawling bald little fatty forward. "Let this little slave of mine test the waters first. Jinji, how can you be so shameless? It's not your little slave's turn. Me, me, me. Let my slaves come." The demonic cultivators screamed excitedly, their hands gripping the iron chains and swinging them. On the other hand, the numb faces of the many ordinary people who were being held by them finally showed a trace of fear. If they were allowed to go up and fight with this level 4 zombie puppet, they would undoubtedly become food in the zombie's mouth. It would definitely be a dead end. "Jinji, go down. According to the rules, we have to draw lots." The village chief raised his hand and glanced at the female demonic cultivator, Jinji. He then lowered his head and looked at the iron walk brat who was lying on the ground, panting like a dog. "Ehe, are you sure you want him to go up?" "That's right, village chief." Jinji raised her chin high. "I've helped Mother Zhen catch many lambs these past few days. Even if there's no merit, there's still hard work. Can't you agree to such a small request?" The skinny dark woman by the name of Mother Zhen didn't even bat an eyelid. She only pulled the iron chain in her hand. "Anyone is fine." Chapter 702. But if your slave is eaten by the corpse puppet within minutes, you will also be punished. Mother Zhen says with a sneer. "That's right." The crowd of demonic cultivators below churns and screams, "We want to watch an exciting match." That's right, that's right. If there's nothing to watch, you will also be punished. Go down, Jinji. Don't talk about a minute, I think your little slave won't even be able to hold on for a second. Facing such a strong level 4 corpse puppet, how can the bald little fatty be its opponent? Hearing that, Jinji is very angry. She heavily kicks the bald little fatty. "You better buck up. Go up. If you dare to lose within a minute, I will skin you alive." The bald little fatty groans and slowly climbs up from the ground. He shakes the chains on his hands, and his eyes emit a crimson cold light as he stares fixedly at Jinji. That's right, it's this kind of warlike gaze. Jinji smiles enchantingly. She stretches out her hand and pats the little fatty's chubby face. She giggles and says, I think highly of you, little fatty Gidge. You can definitely do it. Bah. The bald little fatty spits at her. Everyone bursts into laughter. Jinji's face instantly turns green. Without thinking, she swings a slap towards the little fatty's face. Slap. The little fatty straightens his neck and gnashes his teeth as he stares fixedly at Jinji. Right now, the depths of his heart is filled with hatred. This group of filthy, perverted, and twisted bugs. They killed 3 of his brothers. He hated that he couldn't drink their blood and eat their flesh. He wanted to grind all of their bones and scatter their ashes. Let the little fatty go. Let the little fatty go. Ah. This group of neurotic demonic cultivators start to shout again. They excitedly clap their hands and vigorously cheer for the bald little fatty. Look, the little fatty is carrying a big iron pot on his back. He should be a chef, ha. Arbor's gaze falls on the bald little fatty. She has also met this little fatty once. It was that day when she made up her mind to leave Paradise Planet. As he descended from the snowy peak, he saw the little fatty Zhang Yu and a few of his brothers. At that time, the 4 of them wanted to go to the snow-capped peak to dig something. For a moment she wanted to kill them, but then she let them go. It was only because this Zhang Yu had a history with the Holy Water sect when he was young. But they didn't expect that the world would play tricks on them. They were allowed to live, but they still couldn't escape the fate of being slaughtered by the strong. At this moment, only the little fatty Zhang Yu was left in the 4-man adventurer team. His 3 brothers had all become food on the disgusting grill. These deranged demonic cultivators simply could not be called human. Activate the defensive barrier. At the village chief's command, 4 level 6 mystic cultivators wielding defensive mystic weapons walked forward. At the same time, they injected a wisp of mystic energy into the defensive mystic weapons. Faint rays of light crisscrossed in all directions and propped up a defensive barrier in the center of the plaza. The village chief crossed his arms and looked at the little fatty in amusement. Old rules, if you can survive this game, then we'll let you leave this place. Oh. The demonic cultivators below all let out excited shrieks. This sideshow truly made people so excited that their blood was boiling. Chapter 703. Little girl, are you also mute? The snake beauty glanced at Arbor and Emolien with a strange gaze. She shot a glance over, and one of the ordinary people mixed in with the crowd received her instructions and quietly went into hiding. Arbor slightly hooked up the corner of her lips. Stupid woman, even if they killed someone, they wouldn't let the mute's corpse lie in his own house for nothing. Of course, they would use some medicine to dissolve it. Wouldn't it be a bit too late to find the mute now? Since little girl is also interested in this game, then okay, big sister won't hinder you from watching the show. I'll watch it with you. The snake beauty smiled enchantingly as she glanced at the middle-aged man sitting next to Xiao Mu, who was a stool away. That man saw the snake beauty's gaze and promptly stood up respectfully. He bowed slightly and saluted her. Vice Hall Master, please sit here. Vice Hall Master? Arbor and Emolien glanced at the snake beauty without batting an eyelid. This form of address was a bit interesting. It didn't seem like a form of address for a villager. Could it be that this snake beauty wasn't from the village, or was she someone above the village chief? The snake beauty giggled and twisted her slender waist to sit on the stool next to the middle-aged man. Then she glanced at Arbor, who was some distance away, and felt that the stool was a bit too far away. She simply dragged the stool over and sat down next to Arbor. Emolien looked over with an icy gaze and met the snake beauty's disdainful gaze. The latter rolled her eyes at him and completely ignored him. She just smiled and approached Arbor, saying, "Little girl, big sister will tell you. This program of the battle between humans and corpses was personally designed by the village chief. He's a capable person and can often come up with some ideas that others can't think of. The disparity in strength is so great, it's not good to watch." Arbor turned her little head and snorted. The snake beauty patted her long bare legs. "That's right, little girl. Big sister has decided to let Jinji also enter the arena. What do you say? I don't want to watch the fatty. I just want to watch Jinji and the corpse puppet fight. The fight between a beauty and a corpse is very interesting." Little rascal gave the final word. On the side, Emolien twitched his mouth. The snake beauty suddenly stood up and raised her hand. "Throw the little fatty out. Let Jinji go up." The group of demonic cultivators were instantly dumbfounded. What was going on? What are you doing? What are you doing? Upon hearing this, several level 6 and level 7 mystic cultivators immediately twisted Jinji's arms and dragged her into the defensive barrier. Jinji's beautiful face turned pale. She turned her head and angrily glared in the direction of the Snake Beauty. Fuck you. Snake Beauty, what are you doing? Hurry up and release me. I'm a second-grade demonic cultivator in the village. You can't do this to me. Fuck. While they were talking, the bald fatty had already been dragged out of the defensive barrier and thrown out of the assembly. Mother Jin also threw away the chains in her hands and walked out of the defensive barrier with the village chief, leaving behind the tied-up rank 4 zombie alone. It hopped around in circles in the center of the plaza and roared angrily. Go in. Those mystic cultivators forcefully pushed Jinji, causing her to stagger and stumble into the defensive barrier. Fuck. When Jinji looked up, she saw a close-up and magnified zombie's stinky face. That disgusting appearance of crawling corpse worms covering its face made her vomit. Crack. The level 4 zombie opened its mouth and bit the air. Because its hands and feet were still tied up, it could only open its mouth and roar angrily as it charged at Jinji. Chapter 704. In the nick of time, sharp thorns extended from Jinji's 5 fingers and pierced into the level 4 zombie's throat with a whoosh. It was just that she was a little afraid of being infected by the corpse poison, so she pulled out the thorns from her fingers in less than a second and jumped back a few steps. She had fused with the poisonous mountain thorns, so when she attacked people, she could choose whether to use poisonous thorns or non-poisonous thorns. For example, when she had grabbed Little Fatty's flesh just now, she had used the non-poisonous thorns. But now, facing such a powerful level 4 zombie, in order to save her life, she had to use her best ultimate move. However, with her current ability, she could only use the poisonous thorns 3 times a day at most. There were 7 levels of demonic cultivators, from weak to strong. An average person who could cultivate to the level of a 3rd-grade demonic cultivator was already strong enough. The cultivation of a demonic cultivator was much more difficult than what an average person could imagine. Walking on the path of a demonic cultivator meant that you already had no way out. And Jinji was a 2nd-grade demonic cultivator. In the entire village she could be ranked in the top 100. But even so, the Snake Beauty still treated her like trash that could be discarded at any time and threw her into the field to fight the level 4 zombie for the entertainment of the people. Charge. You big idiot. Several demonic cultivators in the front row angrily slapped their thighs and roared at that silly level 4 zombie. That level 4 zombie didn't fall down after being pierced in the throat by the poisonous thorns. Instead, it hesitated on the spot for a while and looked at Jinji with some confusion. Idiot, hit her. Hit. Kill her. The demonic cultivators all raised their fists above their heads and roared with surging emotions. Jinji retreated a few steps and panted slightly. The thorns between her fingers faintly emitted a blue luster of poisonous light. The poisonous thorns attack just now had been effective. She just had to be a little more careful later. The level 4 zombie fiercely struggled free of the broken bindings on its body, revealing its naked body. The ropes that were originally tied to its body were all broken by it. It roared angrily and suddenly pounced in Jinji's direction. How could a delicious snack not cause the zombie to roar angrily in front of it? It wanted to eat. Roar. The level 4 zombie abruptly stretched out its 2 stiff arms and went straight for Jinji. Jinji staggered backwards and rolled along the ground. She jumped to the back of the level 4 zombie and stabbed her 10 fingers, which were equipped with poisonous spikes, into the back of the level 4 zombie. The grade 4 zombie stretched out its hand in pain and slapped Jinji's head. Jinji only felt a huge force hit her, making her dizzy. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily backwards. Good. All right. The demonic masters cheered crazily. Some of them even stood up excitedly and applauded heavily. Their faces were filled with bloody smiles. Kill her. The Snake Beauty covered her small mouth and giggled. She turned her head to look at Arbor and couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. What's wrong with this little girl? She was watching such an intense match with an expressionless face. Facial paralysis was really an illness. It had to be treated properly. Little girl, isn't the match exciting? Why don't you smile at all? The Snake Beauty really wanted to tease this little guy to talk. Chapter 705. The stoic face turned around and coldly glanced at her. Is it very funny? The Snake Beauty. It was originally very funny, but as soon as I saw your expressionless little face, I suddenly didn't want to freaking laugh anymore. At this time the level 4 zombie shook its head. Because its back had suffered a heavy blow, it swayed its body in place, feeling a bit dizzy. When it turned its head and saw Jinji lying on the ground, it pounced at her with a roar. Fierce shouts erupted from the audience. Every neurotic demonic cultivator couldn't sit still. The people in the back even stepped on the long bench, waving their fists to encourage the zombie. Tear her apart, ah. Tear her apart, tear her apart. Oh okay. Ah. It's time to eat, ha. Arbor swept a glance over the large group of lunatics behind him. Were these people all sick in the head? Little girl, don't look at us like we're lunatics. The snake beauty cutely pouted her small mouth and called out softly, we're not lunatics. It's just that life is too boring. If we don't find some entertainment for ourselves, then wouldn't we have no goals in life at all? Arbor snorted disdainfully. Your goal in life is to stay in this underground world in decadence and kill for fun every day. The level 4 zombie finally got its wish and pounced on Jinji's body. It opened its huge mouth, and its sharp fangs tore open a piece of flesh on Jinji's chin. Jinji only had one last chance to use her poison stinger today. She knew she was dead for sure. Even if she didn't die for the time being, she had already been infected by this level 4 zombie. In a few days she would also become a monster like him. Her 10 fingers, which had turned into highly toxic poison, were already aimed at the level 4 zombie's head. Even if she died, she had to avenge herself first. But at this time, her line of sight suddenly froze. A copper ring strung together by a rotten rope suddenly fell out from the pile of rotten flesh on the zombie's neck and swayed back and forth in front of Jinji's eyes. Jinji's eyes widened in horror, and she stared fixedly at the level 4 zombie in front of her just like that. Its face, which was full of rotten flesh, suddenly transformed into the face of a man with a silly smile. Wife, I bought this copper ring from a street stall. I think it looks pretty good. The boy next door also bought one for his wife. I can't let my wife down. The guy next door is wearing a low-level defensive ring. Do you know anything about defensive rings? Buy me a knockoff. Wife, when I have money, I'll buy you a better defensive ring than the one next door. Ah, why is it you? Why? Jinji's eyes were filled with tears, and the poisonous thorns on her 10 fingers gradually retracted. She could feel her body being gnawed away by the zombie. The physical pain was nothing, but the pain in her heart was indescribable. Her tears fell onto the head of the level 4 zombie puppet. The level 4 zombie glanced at Jinji in confusion. Although it had gained some intelligence, it was not enough for it to recognize that the woman in front of it was once his wife. The undead hag only continued to bite at its food out of instinct. And it's just food. Husband, are you hungry? Jinji's voice trembled slightly. Because she had lost too much blood, her vision was already a blur. Then you can eat me. Chapter 706. Arbor's fingers clenched tightly. When the snake beauty at the side saw this, she giggled enchantingly. Little girl, are you a little regretful? You shouldn't have pushed Jinji out to die like this. TSK, look at how tragic and pitiful they are. They were originally a very loving couple. But now, it has actually evolved into a situation where they kill each other, he. The snake beauty laughed in a cadence. At this time, the assembly hall had long erupted into an uproar. Everyone jumped up and applauded jubilantly because they had watched a great drama. It was as lively as New Year's. Get lost. Emolienne impatiently brushed away the snake beauty's approach with a flick of her sleeve. She reached out and hugged her darling a little closer, stroking her little head while holding her in her arms. You bunch of demons and monsters, how are you worthy of being called humans? Emolienne sneered. What's so pitiful about that Jinji? Haven't the slaves who died in her hands in the past never exceeded 10 digits? She only has herself to blame. What does it have to do with my darling? I'm talking to little sister, why are you interrupting? The snake beauty's expression instantly darkened, and she glared at Emolienne with extreme dissatisfaction. Get lost, I don't want to talk to you, Arbor said coldly. Snake beauty. Can you give me a little face, little sister? Arbor didn't want to say a single word right now, nor was she in the mood to deal with the snake beauty beside her. She sincerely hoped that she could get lost far away. At least for the time being, she didn't want to talk to anyone here. However, the snake beauty loved teasing the stoic face. She didn't give up and continued to tease her. Little miss, do you think that the drama just now was wonderful? Look at Jinji. When she found out that the 4th-rank zombie in front of her was actually her husband, her expression at that time Oh ha 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 ha. Isn't it wonderful and special? Isn't this unexpected encounter well arranged? TSK, don't you think she's stupid? She clearly already knew that the one in front of her was only a corpse. Realistically speaking, he couldn't be considered her husband at all. She clearly had the chance to kill it, but she didn't. TSK, I almost thought she was a good person. The snake beauty continued to chat with the little stoic, even though the little stoic didn't utter a single word and didn't even look at her out of the corner of her eye. What is a pervert like you know? The little stoic suddenly said coldly, every person who can be called a person has once left behind a pure land in their heart. If even this last piece of pure land disappears, then whether it's life or death, it doesn't matter anymore. Emolien's heart tightened and she suddenly reached out to hold the little fellow's little hand tightly. He didn't know why, but he felt that when the little thing said those words, its eyes were illusory and didn't look like it was alive at all. This kind of nothingness that no one could touch made his heart feel very uncomfortable. He held her little hand tightly and gently squeezed it. As for the snake beauty, she coldly looked at the little girl beside her. You're saying that I'm not human. Do you believe that I can immediately let you enter that defensive barrier and come into close contact with that fourth-rank zombie? The snake beauty suddenly drew close to her, and a bewitching dark red color was concealed in the depths of those approaching eyes. It was rather bewitching and wanton, like a merciless whirlpool that wanted to suck in a person's soul. Chapter 707. Arbor's small face was stoic as he coldly stared at the snake beauty in front of him. There wasn't the slightest ripple in the depths of his eyes. It truly made one feel a sense of defeat. The snake beauty's expression instantly changed dramatically and she said with a grin, how about you call me good sister, and I'll spare you from fighting with the level 4 zombie. How about it? She looked at the little stoic with a chuckle with a very good deal, right? Expression on her face. Arbor sneered and turned his small head away, disinclined to look at her again. How infuriating. Why was this stoic face like this, so impervious to everything? This made her very angry. The snake beauty abruptly stood up and shouted with a fierce face, what is everyone waiting for? Pick the next person right now and let this level 4 zombie continue to feed. I don't think it's full yet. When the group of sickly demonic cultivators heard this, they all excitedly screamed and stomped the ground, letting out excited howls. The snake beauty crossed her arms and swept a provocative glance at Arbor. How about it? Did you change your mind? Arbor didn't say a word. He turned around and leaned close to the crown prince, whispering a few words to him. The snake beauty's expression became increasingly gloomy. In the next match, What's the point of fighting with a zombie? Arbor's icy gaze landed next to the village chief. He expressionlessly stood up and pointed at Mother Jin next to the village chief. Do you dare to have a match with me? Wow. This was great. That group of neurotic demonic cultivators were so excited that they stuttered. They all jumped up on the spot and waved their hands and feet, shouting excitedly, someone wants to challenge Mother Zhen. Challenge Mother Zhen. A haze flitted across Mother Zhen's dark and thin face. Her pair of old eyes, filled with the vicissitudes of life, coldly watched the little girl in front of her. Why did she feel that the girl in front of her looked a bit familiar? The snake beauty was startled and immediately reached out to pull her, but the latter dodged her small hand and evaded her. You don't know what's good for you. A faint anger flitted through the depths of the snake beauty's eyes. Do you know who Mother Zhen is? She's a third-rank demonic cultivator. Moreover, she's a speed ability user. You're no match for her. She has fused with the power of a bear's paw. With one slap, even if you don't die, you'll lose a layer of skin. The snake beauty sneered. A person should know their limits. He could tell that the little girl in front of him was only a level 6 mystic cultivator. Don't joke around. A little level 6 mystic cultivator wanted to escape alive from the hands of a third-level demonic cultivator and an acceleration ability? Wishful thinking. Arbor ignored her and walked out of the crowd, slowly walking towards the defensive barrier. How about it? Do you dare or not? Arbor rubbed her small hands and looked at Mother Zhen with cold eyes. Mother Zhen angrily snorted, you're simply courting death. Emolien curled his lips into a sneer. Just now, the little fellow had whispered a few words into his ear, and one of them was, Wu Yanjin's life is mine today. That was right. The little guy recognized Mother Zhen as soon as they met. She was precisely the anti-Wu that Prince Emo had sent to Black City to do hard labor back then. It was unknown why anti-Wu would escape from Black City, and the little fellow didn't want to find out too clearly either. She only knew that Wu Yanjin would undoubtedly die today. There was no need for this filthy underground village to continue existing. After all, it had already been 7 to 8 years, so Wu Yinjin only felt that the little stoic's face was familiar. Chapter 708. In reality, it was naturally impossible for Wu Yinjin to recognize the 7-year-old Arbor and the soon-to-be 15-year-old Arbor at a glance. It was also because her stoic expression didn't change much that Wu Yinjin only felt that she looked familiar. The little fellow was used to sticking an aura-restraining talisman on herself when she went out. This kind of aura-restraining talisman was drawn when she first learned how to draw talismans. They were all beginner-level talismans that could lower one's cultivation by 5 levels. So right now she looked especially sincere, like a tiny level 6 mystic cultivator. A level 6 mystic cultivator actually wanted to challenge Mother Zhen in public. This time, it really stirred up the emotions of all the demonic cultivators. The snake beauty's expression was very unsightly, and she turned to glare at Emo Lien. You actually didn't stop her? Would it work if I stopped her? Emo Lien swept her a glance with a sneer. If I stopped her, wouldn't you have let her go up and fight with a level 4 zombie? The snake beauty curled her lips and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Bit interesting. Emo Lien coldly cast her gaze aside. Who exactly are you people? The snake beauty asked with a smile. I had people go to Mute's house to check, but there weren't any traces. Don't tell me Mute was annihilated by you guys? But it doesn't matter. The snake beauty chuckled, her smile somewhat cold. Mute was originally one of the few people at the bottom of this village. He already hasn't found any prey for nearly half a month. So look at him. He's so skinny because there's no meat to eat. If Mute died, then he died. It's just that I want to know what your purpose in coming here is. A small, sharp dagger appeared between the snake beauty's fingers, and it deftly slid and flipped between her fingers. On the other side, the neurotic demonic cultivator's emotions had already been completely ignited by Arbor. Everyone stood up and shouted agitatedly, their emotions exploding and boiling. Hit her, hit her, hit her. The corners of Wu Yinjin's lips curled up slightly. She suddenly reached out and untied the black robe covering her body, revealing a short green robe inside. She then entered the defensive barrier in high spirits. When the level 4 zombie saw that there was more food coming to its door, it hurriedly threw away Jinji's already cold corpse and pounced towards Wu Yinjin with a roar. In the blink of an eye, Wu Yinjin's fat, deformed palm slid out of her sleeve and slapped the level 4 zombie's head. With a crisp bang, the level 4 zombie puppet's huge head was split open like a watermelon by Wu Yinjin's slap. Wow. Around the market, the crowd screamed and cheered. It couldn't get any better, alright? Sure enough, Mother Zhen was too strong. The moment she made a move, she directly smashed the head of the level 4 zombie like it was a watermelon. Ah! The demonic cultivators laughed wildly as they jumped and roared in unison, Kill her! This little mystic cultivator who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you think you're so great just because you're a mystic cultivator? Let me tell you, even if we're not mystic cultivators, we can still wring the heads of you mystic cultivators off one by one like watermelons. Arbor slowly walked into the defensive barrier amidst this wave of emotional shouts. He coldly raised his head and swept his gaze around. Can you all shut up? A bunch of men, yet they're shouting like ducks. Chapter 709. The voice abruptly stopped. Arbor's gaze coldly shifted to Wu Yinjin's face, and he suddenly pulled out 3 talismans. The immobilization, drowsiness, and dizziness talismans flew in front of Wu Yinjin and suddenly split open. Wu Yinjin's speed wasn't the least bit slow. When she saw the 3 talismans flying over, a trace of graveness gradually condensed in her eyes. Her body moved in the air, and her speed special ability was displayed to the extreme, leaving behind an illusory faint shadow. In fact, her body had already moved 1 meter away. Open! Arbor coldly rebuked. An ebony blue talisman suddenly floated in front of Wu Yinjin, slightly startling her. Her speed was already so fast, but the young lady in front of her actually caught up with her. What was going on? The confinement talisman was activated. Invisible chains instantly bound Wu Yinjin's body, causing her to be unable to move for a moment. Everyone was greatly shocked. The snake beauty also slightly narrowed her eyes, and a dark red color flashed through her eyes. A talisman practitioner? The snake beauty muttered to herself. It was very rare to see a talisman practitioner. After all, those talisman practitioners in Guanlan City basically didn't leave the house at all. They sat at home all day long and studied talisman techniques. Who are you? Wu Yinjin was also shocked. What's your relationship with the Talisman patrician family? If she was someone from the Talisman patrician family, then she would have to carefully weigh whether she should kill the little girl or not. After all, that kind of large patrician family wasn't to be trifled with. Unexpectedly, the little girl didn't fancy the Talisman patrician family at all. She thought of Mu Liangda, and the Talisman patrician family's talisman proficiency could be seen. You don't need to know who I am. Several streams of water drilled out of Arbor's hands, and he coldly looked at the woman in front of him. Are you prepared to die? Wu Yinjin's pupils abruptly contracted, and she stared in disbelief at the streams of water shuttling back and forth in the little girl's hands. The snake beauty also stood up with astonishment. A water spirit practitioner? Impossible. How could such a young water spirit practitioner appear in this boundary? The 5 spirits of this boundary basically couldn't be sensed, so why did the little girl in front of her? 5 nimble streams of water, like snakes, whizzed in front of Wu Yinjin. The streams of water were about to penetrate Wu Yinjin's throat, and Wu Yinjin had yet to break free from the confinement talisman. Her body was bound by invisible chains, and she was struggling with all her might. Suddenly Wu Yinjin let out a loud roar, and a huge bare paw on her right hand actually flew off from her wrist. At the critical moment, his fat palm suddenly grabbed the 5 streams of water that were about to reach his throat. With a few popping sounds, the 5 streams of water in Wu Yinjin's hand exploded as if they were tangible objects that were being crushed. Disdain flashed across Wu Yinjin's eyes. Little doll, if you want my life. What? Before Wu Yinjin could finish speaking, she saw several sharp icicles pierce out of her bare paw, piercing through her bare paw ruthlessly. The icicles pierced through the back of her hand and drilled out of her palm. They extended for more than a meter and instantly hit her throat. Ah! A stream of blood spurted out from her throat without warning. No, it was impossible. Wu Yinjin suddenly discovered that the confinement talisman's effect had been lifted, and she hurriedly used her other hand to block her bleeding throat. Gurgling sounds came from her throat, and Wu Yinjin's face was blank and terrified. See you tomorrow. Chapter 710. This kind of confinement talisman's effect could barely be maintained for a minute. However, in a battle where every second mattered, it was enough for talisman masters to do whatever they wanted with a flip of their hand. Wu Yinjin's bare paw returned to her wrist, and she staggered back a few steps with a dejected expression. Her other hand tightly clutched her throat, and soon her palm was drenched in sticky blood. Seeing that something was amiss, the village chief hastily walked into the defensive barrier. Little girl, immediately stop your willful and reckless attack. Otherwise you will be punished by blood. You can't bear the consequences of this. Before the village chief could say the word rise, his pupils abruptly contracted. Inside the defensive barrier, the little girl suddenly raised her hands, and a pair of plain-colored sleeves embroidered with twining branches fluttered in the wind. Water continuously flowed from her hands and landed on the ground. Kacha, 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 for ice walls rose from the ground, locking herself and Mother Jin inside. The ice walls rose higher and higher, faster and faster. Just as the village chief and his subordinates wanted to scuttle into the defensive barrier, they were firmly held down by an extremely thick and terrifying aura. That aura was like a mountain pressing down on the village chief and the others. They had all tried to barge into the defensive barrier and stop Arbor from building the ice walls. But now they were pinned to the ground by that aura, and cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. When the entire ice wall sealed off all directions, the ice wall began to move. Everyone in the plaza, regardless of whether they were demonic cultivators, mystic cultivators, or ordinary people, all looked at this scene in astonishment. A water spirit master was actually a water spirit master who could use such a strong water spirit master. The snake beauty muttered to herself as she looked in Arbor's direction, slightly raising her long eyebrows. She actually made an error in judgment. At the top of the 4 ice walls, a transparent ice wall was slowly sealing the space above the 2 people's heads. Finally, it was seamlessly sealed. The 2 people were isolated from the crowd and sealed within a rectangular, transparent, sparkling ice wall. The circle of fire on the periphery illuminated this ice wall, making it seem somewhat dreamy. Wu Yinjin wanted to speak, but as soon as she opened her mouth, blood gushed out from her throat. She could only glare at Arbor with a pair of venomous eyes, using her gaze to ask her, "Who are you?" Arbor ignored Wu Yinjin, this shrew. In reality, it was a bit strenuous for her to use water to create such a large ice wall for the first time. She was silent right now because she was seizing the time to recover most of the mystic energy in her mystic meridians. She wasn't sure how others used water and fire spirit power. In any case, ever since she merged with the natal essence water, she was able to use her profound energy to control this surge of water spirit energy. This was indeed very strange, and she herself also felt that it was a little strange. Logically speaking, her profound energy had yet to transform into spiritual energy, so she shouldn't be able to control the water spirit. However, when she used her profound energy to control the water spirit energy, it was rather easy for her to do so. On the other side, when Wu Yinjin saw that Arbor was ignoring her, she became even more nervous and stared straight at her. "Who the hell are you?" Arbor only recovered for a bit before taking a deep breath. Her gaze revealed a trace of frigidity as she stared at Wu Yinjin, who was using her gaze to question her. Her small mouth slightly opened as she spat out a cold sentence. "Go to the Yellow Springs and ask around." "Who am I?" "I'm the person who wants your life." Chapter 7:11. Arbor's eyes narrowed and a burst of powerful profound energy exploded from her body. In an instant, one of the ice walls closest to Wu Yinjin suddenly turned into pieces of 6 water chestnut snowflakes. Wu Yinjin clutched her neck and stiffly turned her head around, only to see pieces of snow flying up. This scene was truly a little frightening. What kind of water spirit control was this? Arbor gently raised a small hand and pushed her palm forward slightly. All the 6 water chestnut snowflakes fluttered and spun in the air like fairies singing and dancing. In an instant, they uniformly surrounded Wu Yinjin's direction. Walala, a large mass of snowflakes whooshed around Wu Yinjin's body, cutting her up and down. Outsiders simply couldn't see the situation of Mother Zhen, who was surrounded by snowflakes. They could only see her figure moving back and forth within the ice walls. Her speed was extremely fast, but the speed of the snowflakes surrounding her was even faster. Wu Yinjin's body expanded by more than 3 times in an instant, turning into a war bear. She let out a weak, miserable howl, mixed with the gurgling sound of death coming from her throat. Everyone finally got a clear look at her current sorry state. Her hair was bald, her limbs and body and even her face were scraped by the snowflakes until there wasn't a single piece of undamaged flesh. Bang! Another ice wall shattered, completely turning into a mass of snowflakes, pressing towards Wu Yinjin's tall body. Following closely one after another, the remaining 3 ice walls all cracked. Snowflakes were like turbulent torrents, like pieces of small sharp daggers, piercing through Wu Yinjin's body and limbs. She was attacked from the front and back, her entire body was being torn apart by this kind of extreme torture. Like crazy, she swung her bare paws with all her might, slapping away the snowflakes that gathered around her. But it was completely useless. These snowflakes were extremely crafty and terrifying, even extremely spiritual. Even if they were slapped away by her, scattering into water droplets, but very quickly they would once again melt into ice and snow, absolutely endless. Ah! Wu Yinjin let out a series of hoarse roars. Because she had lost too much blood, there wasn't a single piece of undamaged flesh on her body. At the same time, her eyes also became abnormally blurry, almost unable to see the girl standing diagonally in front of her. Was this the limit? It must be very painful to have such a broken body, right? So back then, when her Shaoliner was thrown into the wild like a ragged doll and was bitten by wild dogs, it must have been even more painful. What was this kind of pain? Arbor stretched out his hand, and his profound energy suddenly erupted violently once again. The snowflakes that had been circling around Wu Yinjin suddenly paused for a moment before shattering into pieces. The tiny snowflakes hit Wu Yinjin's skinny body. If it were only 1 or 2 snow particles, they wouldn't be able to harm Wu Yinjin at all. After all, she was a demonic cultivator who had fused with the sturdy body of a battleground bear. Her defense was naturally not to be underestimated. But right now hundreds of billions of tiny snow particles were hitting Wu Yinjin's skin all of a sudden. Hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands of them hit every inch of her skin, instantly breaking through her defense. Everyone was dumbstruck and speechless as they watched Mother Zhen being shot into a sieve in front of them. Countless tiny snow particles hit back and forth on her 4 limbs, smashing fiercely with whooshing sounds. Chapter 7:12. In the blink of an eye. All of Mother Zhen's bones, flesh, and blood were crushed into fine powder by the dense shooting snowflakes. Her body was like a puddle of mud, loosely and softly falling down. With a crash, she broke into a pile of minced meat. The snake beauty's pupils abruptly contracted, and she reflexively looked at the little stoic standing far away. The little fellow's stoic little face was apathetic, cold, and solemn, completely devoid of any expression. Under the swirling snowflakes, the little girl in a plain pink dress was like a naturally formed sculpture in a world of ice and snow. The eyes of the merciless queen who controlled ice and snow contained endless desolation and loneliness. At the same time, after losing Wu Yenjin as their target, the fine snowflakes that filled the sky pierced through the outer defensive barrier with a whooshing sound. This caused the 4 level 6 mystic cultivators who were increasing their power to throw away the shattered defensive mystic weapons in their hands in fright and to flee to the back of the assembly hall. A level 6 mystic cultivator who was slow to flee was immediately pierced through the back of his head by countless snowflakes, and he abruptly fell to the ground. The village chief forcefully mustered all the strength in his body and broke through the pressure pressing down on his back. Because of this, he even spat out a mouthful of old blood, and his furious expression also contorted. Hurry! Hurry! Kill that damn girl! Kill her! That damn girl, she actually killed Mother Zhen. Mother Zhen was one of the few third-class demonic cultivators they had nurtured. She was completely different from Jinji, that kind of mediocre second-class demonic cultivator. Previously, in order to let Mother Zhen properly assimilate, they had expended a large amount of manpower and resources just to find that demonic beast, War Earth Bear. They had finally managed to nurture Mother Zhen to a useful state, but now, she freaking died in the hands of an unknown little mystic cultivator. Even the village chief felt heartache at sacrificing a third-class demonic cultivator for no reason. After receiving the village chief's order, the demonic cultivators all rushed toward Arbor with crazed expressions on their faces. Emolienne sneered. As soon as she moved, she was surrounded by a large group of demonic cultivators summoned by the Snake Beauty. Get out of the way if you don't want to die. A whip condensed from a line of fire, burning with raging purple flames, drew an S-shaped crack on the ground, sweeping across with an unstoppable strike. The bodies of the demonic cultivators who were touched by the purple flames suddenly ignited with a trace of purple flames. As the purple flames burned more and more vigorously, the demonic cultivators screamed as they rapidly retreated. A bunch of demons and monsters, how dare you block my path? Go to hell. Emolienne's eyes turned cold. There seemed to be 2 pitch-black lotuses spinning in the depths of her eyes like whirlpools, faintly pulsing with 2 cold and evil lights. Merciless purple flames that seemed to swallow the heavens and devour the sun rose from his flipped palms, fiercely chasing after the demonic cultivators who were fleeing in all directions. Boom! The purple flames smashed a deep pit in the center of the plaza. Several novice demonic cultivators who were caught off guard didn't even have the chance to call for help before they were smashed into the deep pit by the purple flames and lost their lives. A pair of wings suddenly spread out from the village chief's back, flapping as he fled into the depths of the village. He shouted, "A strong enemy is invading, a strong enemy is invading. Activate the village's destruction talisman matrix. Activate the village's destruction talisman matrix." Damn it, that youth who didn't seem to have the slightest trace of mystic energy around him was actually an extremely powerful fire spiritual cultivator. Chapter 7:13. At this time, a sharp whistle appeared in the sky above the village. The ground violently trembled from this whistle. Everyone was forced to sway their bodies, and they were practically unable to walk properly. The large grill collapsed, and the 3 figures wearing the grill fell heavily to the ground. The little fatty carried the iron pot on his back and crawled on the ground continuously for several minutes before barely crawling to the front of his 3 bloodied brothers. He bawled his eyes out and bawled his eyes out. Run! The ordinary crowd was in chaos. Taking advantage of the fact that the demonic cultivators couldn't even take care of themselves, they all scattered like birds and beasts. Run! Everyone pushed and shoved each other in panic as they rushed toward the village entrance. However, after the destruction talisman matrix was activated, the entire village's ground became rugged and uneven. A crack or 2 opened up on the swaying ground from time to time, swallowing up the frantically running people one by one. One of the demonic cultivators seemed to have fused with the leopard's speed as he shuttled through the crowd very quickly. When he saw a fissure in the ground, he jumped over it very vigorously and dodged the fissure. The corners of his mouth curled up into a satisfied smile. In the face of danger, everything was fake. Only by running faster than others could one obtain a slim chance of survival. However, while this smile was still hanging at the corners of his mouth, the enormous bamboo building in the marketplace came crashing down with its roots. A large bundle of bundled bamboo sticks, and bamboo tablets smashed into his back with a loud bang. That demonic cultivator's mind went blank. He didn't jump in time and was immediately sucked into the merciless crack, leaving behind a pitiful howl. Arbor's figure flashed, and he blocked in front of that village chief who was flapping his wings, calling out, "Qingwan." He threw out several talismans in succession, and his entire body leaped up, landing steadily on Qingwan's back. Qingwan let out a shrill cry and spewed out a large mouthful of icy mist, which swept in the village chief's direction. The village chief was shocked, and he stared at Arbor in disbelief as he roared, "You're not a level 6 mystic cultivator, you're not a level 6 mystic cultivator. You're making a fuss over nothing and made yourselves miss it. Confinement talisman. Open." Arbor gazed coldly at the village chief and didn't answer his question. Instead, he used the confinement talisman right away. She wanted it. Capture them alive. 5 confinement talismans sealed village chief's escape route. Qingwan was above him, completely blocking village chief's escape route. The village chief's pupils constricted. As the invisible chains climbed up his body and tightly bound him, he let out a shrill cry. "Little girl, you've got guts. My master won't let you off. Don't even think about getting anything out of me." Arbor coldly spat out a word and threw out 2 more dictum talismans. "Tell me who built this underground village." Arbor's voice was cold as if it had been fished out from the cold night. The village chief hammered his head hard, and his eyes instantly became bloodshot. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He knew something was wrong and retreated. The village chief screamed crazily, "Master will not let you off." Wah. Abruptly, the village chief self-detonated, directly shattering those invisible confinement chains around him. Although Arbor had long been on guard against this person, the force of the self-detonation at close range was truly too great, and she and Qingwan were abruptly slapped to the ground. Chapter 7:14. Jojo. After burning several demonic cultivators who had surrounded him to death with his purple flames, Emolien looked up and saw his Chow Chow being sent flying by the burly village chief's self-detonation, sliding straight into a bottomless crevice in the ground. Emolien was so frightened that her heart trembled. She bounced up and swiftly darted to Arbor's side. "Jojo." Arbor only had time to comfort her with a, "It's fine," before he was instantly pulled into the crevice by a suction force. Emolien. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. The rumbling sound of bubbling underground water reached her ears. Soon after, she seemed to see a round object fall into the crevice along with her. Boom. Arbor fell into the vast, ice-cold underground water. Following the surging underground water, he seemed to slide endlessly into the depths of the Earth's core. Jojo. Emolien swiftly chased after Arbor with a few leaps. She turned around and coldly ordered Huifeng and the others, who were following closely behind, "Leave no one here alive." Without looking back, she directly jumped into the crevice with a bang. Emolien was also quickly swept down by the surging underground water. "Your Highness." Huifeng turned pale with fright. He turned around and said to his subordinates, "You guys stay here and clean up." After saying that, he also jumped into the crevice after Emolien. The remaining several dozen nimble black-clothed youths immediately spread out and hunted down the demonic cultivators like wolves and tigers. The demonic cultivators were exhausted from running for their lives. How could they have expected that a small group of ominous stars would suddenly appear in the village and attack them without a second word? The ground kept shaking and cracking, and several demonic cultivators were sucked into the crevice due to a moment of carelessness. The youths of the Hidden Night Pavilion were carrying out a mechanical extermination in the dark night. On the other side, Arbor, who had fallen into a crack in the ground and was flowing down along with the rumbling underground water, only felt a little uncomfortable from the resistance of the water flow. He couldn't help but circulate his mystic energy to protect his body. "Master, don't worry. These water currents won't hurt you. Try to merge with them instead of resisting them. Try it, Master." The water baby's soft and cute voice suddenly rang in her mind. "Assimilate?" The water baby's words gave Arbor a hint of inspiration. She was originally an intelligent person and understood with just a hint. Immediately, she silently circulated her profound energy and tried to merge it with the surrounding water. In this way, she only felt that the water around her flowed happily. Clusters of water were like naughty elves, gently caressing her skin. The resistance quietly vanished. She was someone who had fused with her life essence water, so she should have a greater affinity with the water spirit than anyone else. The gushing water formed a circle around her body. Arbor reached out a finger and lightly touched it. The ice-cold water flowed along her finger and unwittingly formed a transparent membrane around her body. This water membrane adhered closely to her body and freely shrunk and enlarged as she stretched and moved her limbs. This was a water spirit barrier, right? She had roughly glanced through the usage of the water spirit in the technique chapter of the Spirit Division record. However, she could only control 1 or 2 small streams at that time, so she didn't look at this technique in detail. Who would have thought that by chance she would inexplicably have an epiphany in the rapids? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.